Okay, roll call. Cynthia?
Here.
Sarah?
Here.
Eva? Is Eva here? Yes. Eva?
Mustafi, aye.
Thanks for masking up. Heather?
Right here.
Art?
Here.
Johnston here. Okay.
And let's note, Alexa is here also. She's on she had to dial in on a phone line this time, but she is here also.
So should we start with public comments, Chair?
Yes,
Yep, Wally, unless you had something else, we have public comments up first.
let's do that.
If we have any comments, if you'd like to make a comment, you can raise your hand from the raise your hand button down below. We will scan the list and see if we have any. Not seeing any yet.
Don't see anything.
Don't see anything. Okay. Then right to correspondence. You know, Wally, I didn't really separate them out, but I looked at just correspondence since Friday. And total, because so many of it's mixed, I counted 5 total, all related to re-entry somehow on different themes. One on the alphabetical split, one on remote questions, one on communication, one on testing, and one on sports.
Thank you. And chairs and liaison reports. I don't know if we have any since our last meeting 5 days ago, but anybody want to make any comments?
I will just comment with a thanks again to Court for taking over as chair while I was mostly absent for 2 weeks, and apologies to everybody that I was offline a lot. I'm back, for better or for worse. Thanks for covering while I was gone.
I took my training wheels off and apparently things worked out.
It sounds like they worked out even better, Court, so maybe you should just keep the role.
Oh, no. The little I can report by way of activity is that one of our congresspersons, Lori Trahan, is hosting a Thursday online meeting with the Commissioner of Education. If people want to go to her website and dial into that meeting, that's an opportunity that just came up today.
Great, thank you.
Along those liaison activity, the Public Access Committee is having a meeting on the 30th of September. I'm the member on there from the school committee. So you will need to nominate somebody. It's not an observant position. You're actually on the committee. So maybe if people could think about whether they want to be on that committee for next year and come to our next meeting with that indication. If there's more than 2, then we can have a vote on that and let them know we've got somebody who's going to be there.
Wally, for those who are new, can you give a quick high level of what it is?
Yeah, basically the PAG Access Committee, and I'm getting the name wrong, but that's effectively what it is. It's a committee that is engaged in advising the Minuteman Network. Doesn't really have any statutory authority under the way, given the way things are set up now, and that department reports to the town. But it is a nice way to interact with those folks. There's some people who are well versed in the technical and qualitative aspects of public access and are very dedicated. And it gives us an opportunity, since it's housed at the high school, it gives us a nice opportunity to be able to sort of come at some of the things that they're working on from a school perspective and also just kind of monitor what's going on to make sure that it's in line with what we think is happening there. So I've enjoyed it. I've been on there for 2 years, I think. Court had done it for
Long time.
prior to that, and as a community member. And is sometimes at those meetings. If you've got any other questions, give me a call. I can also put you in touch with Carlin Reed, who is probably as well versed in what the committee does as anybody.
Thanks.
Nothing else. Superintendent's report, I assume, is going to roll right into the task force updates.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is.
So we'll take 4 and 5 together.
Sounds good. So as you can see, I have the administrative team here with me tonight. So wherever they are, if they can turn on their video, if it's not already on. What I think our goal tonight is to give you an opportunity to share information, probably at a layer of detail that we haven't done in this forum yet, to ask questions and really just make it a dialogue. So in trying to have an approach to structure the conversation, I put together a set of slides really just as an outline of topics for us to talk about. And then I think it just lends itself to direction as we go rather than making it just totally wide open. And those topics are based on the questions that the committee members sent to me over the last week or 5 days. At different points, it'll be obvious that one of the leaders should answer the question, and at some points it could be that we ask 1 or 2 of them at different levels to respond. And at some points it'll be very clear it's one building-based kind of a topic, and we'll want to talk directly to them. So that's my approach, is to just open it up that way, and it really is your discussion to have with us to answer questions and hear information that you're hoping for. We did try to front load a lot of information to you with the handbooks getting to you in the draft form, as well as some other documents that have been underway over the last week or so in preparation to go out to families. So I'm gonna just put my slides up and we'll go through the topics, and then I'll ask different folks to give their thoughts on it, and then the committee can make it the discussion you're hoping for. Let me just share my slides here.
Lori, as you're pulling up those slides, might we ask that the presenters suggest to us if it's a district-wide level information they're giving us that represents the other 4 buildings, for example, or whether it's unique to their building, just to help you streamline.
Sure. Absolutely. And sometimes I think that'll be obvious, and other times it'll need to be clarified. So I thought we'd start with the big picture pieces. Obviously, we've built models, but I think it's just really important to stress that we are going to be running all these models all at once. So the elementary kids are in person by definition of the state's definition, because all of them are coming, even though they're remote in the afternoon. Middle and high school are hybrid, and then we have a population of students who will be 100% remote, and I'll show you those numbers in a minute. I'm just going to give high-level information, and then we can take questions and comments from everyone. One thing that was really important to us was to make these fluid, making sure that the schedules were very similar as much as we possibly could to one another, that we could pivot between them, and that, again, as much as possible, achieve that individual kids could pivot between them. Because the other piece is that even kids who come to the schools, if they're quarantined or if anything like that happens, or if they're just sick, regular old sick, they're still going to be out for a bit. So some of the structure to that fluidity is around the learning management systems. We are very cohesive now in terms of Seesaw being available at the elementary schools for the lower grades, and Google Classroom for the upper elementary and through the high school. And indeed, it's become very apparent to us, which I think was to everyone, but worth stating. We will be having a small population of students in school full-time, those in special education intensive programs. We will have the elementary kids in for half the day, all of them. We will have the middle and high school kids on the rotating schedule hybrid, and we will have that population that's home full-time. So I thought just before we go to questions, I know there was interest in knowing the data as we have it. This is as of Sunday when I pulled it. The numbers are a little higher than we had initially seen in the original survey. I'll let you read those. And then just high level piece of the schedules that we're creating. And then I'm going to turn it over to the administrators for a minute just to talk on this portion. The elementaries, we've actually, after a lot of conversation, decided it's best to service them within the building-based approach rather than trying to do a broad K-5 district-wide approach. So I can ask the principals to talk on that. And that did change the schedule a little bit. So it's not just split with morning being live and the afternoon being independent. And that I think that may be a positive. It is a positive in my opinion. The middle and high school remote students will be following their regular schedules. And that was really important to us because that's going to give them a lot of flexibility and connection. I can't stress enough our desire to keep the students who aren't attending connected to their classmates and to their classrooms. So they're going to be assigned to one of the hybrid groups and they'll be getting live access to the instruction on the days that the rest of the class is in person. So I don't know, maybe Angel, you could just talk for a minute on the model for the elementary and then we can just see what other questions there are and talk more on any other pieces of this that are of interest.
Lori, before we leave this slide behind and go to Angel, do the elementary numbers of remote roughly correlate with school populations, number one? And number two, can you speak to our Boston students and how those numbers look within this table?
I guess for the most part, they correlate just in terms of Alcott's our biggest student enrollment and Willard's our smallest. So we haven't done that percentage exactly, but that does parallel this.
This is live, yeah.
I know there's background noise, so if people would just mute, that'd be great. And then in terms of the Boston students, and I don't have the data exactly off the top of my head, so I'll let the principals weigh in, but there is a slightly bigger percentage of Boston students opting for the full remote. So I can let Naomi and the others answer anything more specific.
Thank you.
Angel, do you want to go first on the schedule?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So we thought that, you know, given the varying numbers, for example, you know, at certain grade levels, we happen to have larger numbers of students. An example would be at my 5th grade in my building, we have 17 students who are opting into remote, which essentially is a class in and of itself. So we thought that it would be best for us to create a schedule that would allow students to be serviced by the teachers in their home buildings. And that has been, we're continuing to work on the schedule, but we also heard from parents who, you know, who were interested in more asynchronous activities in the afternoon, not just the morning. So by utilizing our own staff and being able to sync up with homeroom teachers, we're going to be able to have a little more flexibility and to give them more instruction by known providers. So we're very excited about that.
Naomi, do you just want to talk a little on the Boston?
Yes. Hi. I was doing a little math because I had raw numbers but not percentages. So our METCO students, we do have a higher percentage of METCO students who opted into the full remote compared to the school overall. So Alcott is about 15% fully remote. Although that does vary by grade level with lower numbers in the primary grades and higher numbers in the upper grades. And our METCO percentage remote is actually 35%. So there are more students from METCO who are opting into the full remote program than the rest of the school.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And then Lori, just to follow up on what Angel was saying earlier about having staff within each building. So when students, as we anticipate, we're hopeful, but transition back, the transition will be that much smoother because all the personnel who've been teaching those students will be able to do the knowledge transfer as they return to our classrooms, and then support the students when they're back with us. So we're very confident that that's a model that's going to be very successful.
Mhm.
Can I ask a quick question? So if you're like a second grade student and you're all remote, how do you access your primary teacher if in fact they're in the classroom?
So Alexa, so if you're fully remote, if you're part of the Remote Learning Academy, then you have a teacher that will be teaching your child for the duration, the time that the child is in the remote learning environment. The time that they will be part of a classroom setting would be during the specials in the afternoon.
Got it. So they get their teacher and then they sort of cohort into their music class with the kids that they would have been with if they had been in school.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And otherwise, it's a separate educator that is not, you know, first grade Mrs. Barry or whatever.
Right. So,
Right?
so they're all certified teachers for that grade level. But yeah, so it wouldn't be it wouldn't be Mrs. Barry for first grade. You're right.
Okay. And kids at Willard are not in a remote learning classroom with kids from Alcott or Thoreau.
That's correct.
Got it.
Students
Okay.
from Alcott will be taught by Alcott teachers and Thoreau by Thoreau teachers and Willard by Willard teachers. Yep.
Sorry, you guys, that I needed clarification on it. Just
No, it's
curious.
all good.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alexa. Thanks for clarifying.
And to build on that, so that also means, as you were saying, you know, in the fifth grade, for instance, at Thoreau, there might be 17 kids. In some of the lower grades, I'm sure there are less. But the education obviously happens grade-wise. So does that mean that some of those kids who are going remote, say first or second graders, might have a pretty small cohort or class, so to speak, that they're working with remotely?
Yes, that's correct. So contrary to fifth grade, we only have 7 students at the kindergarten level. So that will be a very small group.
Okay, great.
We're trying to be flexible because there's so much variance between the number of students opting in at each grade level.
Right. And yet that's great for those kids. They're in a small group, and that's terrific. They'll get the extra attention, especially the young ones.
And they'll be in a small group with peers from their own school.
That's great. Yeah.
But Heather, just to also comment on, so what that means for us is just we're to the very last minute, we're continuing to receive through Friday requests for one or the other. So we're still doing placement. So for those of you who are listening tonight, placement is not going to be done until the end of the week at earliest. So we appreciate everyone's patience, but also understanding that as we are accommodating, you know, moving some kiddos around, it's just taking a little bit longer.
Understandably.
Thanks, Heather.
All right.
So this is Cynthia. I just have one more question just to triple clarify because I think I understand. But at the elementary schools, no teacher is going to have to teach remote students from a live classroom, if that's a correct terminology.
That is correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, that's excellent. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we I think we worked really hard to look at what was developmentally appropriate and what would make sense to for the student and for the teacher. And with the younger kids, we know remote really requires small group to be effective. We learned a lot about that this spring, and the whole model, both you know, for the afternoon component for all kids, plus this component for the people that are choosing not to attend in person, and even the remote model, should we close again, we know that the small group has to be the anchor to the elementary piece. We are far more comfortable with the larger group sizes at the middle and high school, as well as being comfortable with the kids accessing, you know, the live instruction in the classroom as a piece of what they're going to be doing. That won't be their entire model, because they'll be working with the hybrid kids who are also home 2 of the 5 days or 2.5 of the 5 days or whatever. So So yes, developmentally appropriate has been our thinking all along, which has, I think, been positive. Right. Any other questions on that or any of the other pieces I mentioned? All right, so let me just go to, are you okay if I change topics here? I'll go to my next slide. So I know personnel, and this has been a big piece of where my time has been going along with the principals, is to work through how we were going to staff the schools. And so let me just show you this. This is, I think we took a creative approach here, and it is creative, and with that's going to come some newness to a school environment that we've never seen before. And again, it's that hybrid model with a different approach to it. So I aggregated where we're at with some of the staffing pieces, and I will say this is changing. It's changing more slowly now, and I'll just give some of the patterns of what's evolved as especially the month of August has happened. I started first, and I think this is really important for me to say out loud. I started first by working with staff and teachers, and I'll talk just faculty for the moment and not support staff. Faculty with medical concerns about coming back. I'm going to stress valid medical concerns about coming into a COVID, a virus environment in the public, which we believe is safe, but if you're at risk, it may not feel that way. So working through them and them working with their physicians, these are people that were going to not be able to participate in in-person instruction. So I think we tried to come up with an approach that would allow them to still teach. They were actively wanting to stay connected with kids and actively teach. And so we've come to this middle ground where there's going to be, and I combined them all. It's teachers, counselors, some service providers. I put them all into the same numbers here tonight so that you can see right going into the opening of schools, we have 16 faculty at the high school that will be teaching and working from home with students who will be in person some of the time at school. So they'll be in the school some of the time while the teachers are home. The middle school, it's actually the same number. And you can see at the elementary school, again, developmentally different. I could not see how you could have elementary teachers, again, for the same reasons. The large class sizes being remote isn't as effective at elementary. So I was very, very minimalist in approving any of those requests. The two that I approved are, they work in small groups of kids to start with, or are even support people, technology, for example, that don't service kids directly. So that's one piece that's in place, is these teachers who will be teaching remote. So they will be essentially teaching as if the whole class was remote. And that'll have the kids on Zoom. They'll be doing breakout groups. There'll be direct instruction. There'll be independent work in between. And it's really important to stress, whatever way we're talking about remote teaching, this is not the remote teaching of the spring. Everyone's worked really hard this summer. I know we've spent a lot of time talking hybrid, but part of the hybrid model is the remote part, because the kids are remote half of the time. Really looking at how to reach kids in a remote setting so that we are effective. The professional development Kristen put together has been really highly attended. Teachers are very versed in strategies and really eager to use those strategies. So, and we're going to be working off of the regular class schedule. It'll be a full period, much aligned with what a traditional school day would expect. So that's one piece. And then just quickly on the others, the leave of absence numbers are, for multiple reasons, there's legislation right now in place. We're operating under as many as 5 federal laws in terms of how people might not be able to attend the workplace. Some of them are previous laws that now have COVID provisions. Some of them are CARES Act provisions and new abilities for that. So a combination of the personal medical, the family medical, and the child care leaves is what those numbers reflect. And again, those are a combination of teachers, of counselors, of anyone within the bargaining units, essentially. Retirements, the school committee was part of this. We had 5 retirements at the elementary level when we offered the incentive. Those are, all 5 of them were in the category likely of ending up in one of the first 2 categories, but because they were all elementary, there really was an opportunity for them to be remote. So that would have been another bunch of leaves of absences. And then I just thought it was worth noting the support staff, I'm not giving the same options to, because we need them to be in school with the kids, and that's just critically important to us in the supervisory and support roles. And so between the combination of medical concerns or childcare, we are seeing some transition there and turnover there. And you can see the numbers of resignations as of today. And that's been some of the more recent work. I will say these are still evolving, and much of what is still evolving is about childcare. All of the public schools, there's no one open full time for all kids. It's not doable with the safety requirements. I haven't heard any community that's been able to figure that out. And so it's creating a massive, and it's not just in the teachers' worlds or in the schools, a massive childcare issue everywhere. And that's evolving. Our teachers are working really hard to figure it out, but I do have a number that I'm still talking to that just aren't sure what they're going to do. It could be some per diem leave of absences, which is allowed under the law. It could be just, trying to work out how they're going to manage their own hybrid schedule at home and what their kids need. Concord Rec is still talking with me about perhaps creating one more program at Ripley that could be for children that don't attend the Concord schools, but attend outside, or maybe at the middle school level where we aren't offering Concord Rec as an option. So we're still all brainstorming this, trying to make it doable. But there's no question, this is, I guess I just should say out loud, some of the districts that have had to go remote, it is because of this. Not because there are people refusing to come, not because there's people that are just too anxious to come, but because of very valid reasons. And I'm going to attest to that's what's played out for us. And we're just trying to be really creative at how we work together to manage it, because that's been how we've been operating. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, or if you have any follow-ups for the principals.
Lori, if I might, can you speak more to the first row, remote teaching counseling service provision?
Sure.
2 kinds of questions. One is these seem similar in that they are student facing, but not similar in terms of the roles. So I wonder if you can clarify a little bit further. And then secondly, when we look at these numbers of 1616-2, these are people who applied to you in effect for some kind of accommodation.
Yes.
And you have thus far approved. This is not the same number as the number of remote teachers who are currently in place at K-5 or middle school or the high school. These are instead people who approach you, quite different than teachers who have been approached by the district to fulfill those remote roles. Am I correct?
Yeah, let me differentiate. So that's a very good question. The first question, really anyone in the bargaining unit of the CTA or CTA is who I've listed there. And obviously within the bargaining units, we have classroom teachers, we have special educators, we have counselors. It's a range of that. We have technology specialists. So it's any of those positions that are in the bargaining unit. And obviously they vary. Some are regular classroom teachers, some are guidance counselors who tend to see at most small groups of kids just by the nature of their job. In terms of what you just asked, the only place right now that we have allocated at our request remote teachers at the elementary schools in a couple of situations because of the numbers, and I'll go back, because of how the numbers have played out here and where the numbers fell, we actually had class size reduce enough or so much that there had to be a discussion of collapsing sections. So Naomi at Alcott probably had the most dramatic example of that. Do you want to tell just a little bit of your 5th grade story?
Sure. Let me just pull that up so I use the right numbers. Yeah, so we were scheduled, so we have 89 fifth graders who are enrolled right now. And when I did this data, it's changed a little bit since this weekend when I pulled it, but we had 22 students who had applied to be remote in fifth grade. And so we did have an extra classroom at the fifth grade. We had 5 sections in fifth grade. And so even by collapsing a class, our in-person class size is still 16 or 17. And so we were able to sort of repurpose a staff member to use them for the remote academy and some of the fifth grade classes are still smaller than some of my lower grade classes for in-person, just because there was such a large number of fifth graders who applied to be fully remote.
All right.
So Court, there's a small group of elementary people who have been asked by us to do the remote work with the elementary kids who are staying home. And all of the people that you saw in the chart I just showed have applied's probably not quite the right word, but approached the district to ask for accommodations, which fits under the ADA legislation in terms of how we could try to offer them a way to accomplish their job with a different approach.
And Naomi, it's our understanding that remote teacher at the fifth grade, as with others, would be teaching from his or her classroom.
Correct. Yep,
Mhm.
they'd be a part of the school community. They'd be there. Yes, absolutely.
And our contract with the Concord Teachers Association is such that very few students would tip that 22 into another kind of configuration.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
22 is approaching our class size limit.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, and we're keeping a really close eye on that one because, and this I think touches a little bit on what Mr. Lucy was saying. If that number goes up much more, we're going to have to, we'll have to think about some ways to reduce that size because you're right, 22 is yep, it's large.
You all look rather calm given what you're dealing with.
Just
They're giving you their best tonight. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Thanks, Court. So let me turn you to the next set of the next topic here then. This next slide and the one after, this first one's specific to the middle school. We wanted to do some follow-up. We've been having a lot of discussion about the hybrid model at the middle school. Obviously, the middle school has got its own unique characteristics, of course. The hybrid model overall feels like it's the fit. It really became a scheduling discussion at both the middle and high school. And in looking at the Wednesdays, as you know, our first intent had been to alternate those. In really doing the work with Justin and the teachers and the CTA leadership, the Wednesday piece with their schedule just wasn't falling right. And it was starting to breed some inequities. And then we really started talking about the hopes of the middle school staff, which was to get all of the kids in the same place at least once a week. And by having a fully remote Wednesday, we are proposing that we would be able to, one, lengthen the instructional day. The half-day model for them in person is very, very short blocks, and Justin can talk better on this all in a minute. Very, very short time blocks, typically, to the point of 20 minutes of this and then transitioning in the health and safety protocols and then 20 minutes of something else. It just didn't feel like it was going to be effective. So this would allow us to go to what the Tuesdays used to be for the middle school and have a day's worth of instruction up until 1:30. The 1:30 to end of day piece would be what they're used to, which would be staff release time to have their team meetings and department meetings, et cetera. And most of all, and this was by far the priority, was that it would give us a day every week where the teacher has a class where all the kids are in one virtual place together. And that would include the hybrid kids. It would include the kids who are 100% remote, and really just give us that sense of community, albeit in a way that our first choice would be that we could all have them all in the school together. But since we can't, the virtual environment felt like a good option. We can also lengthen our home base, which is our advisory program, and give them a chance to do some of the really important SEL work that we know we need to do this coming year. So that's the first piece. And then I'll go to the second, then we can talk with Justin on the big picture. Through the HVAC report that you had access to when we met, I guess it was just a week ago. We know, obviously, without the climate control at the middle schools, we've been really looking carefully at a lot of things there, more than we need to at the other schools. And part of that, as you heard, the fans can't operate it the way they normally would on a hot day. And we also know we need to watch CO2 levels. And I am in agreement. We feel pretty strongly that given the limited availability of fans, which has been the anchor of how we've operated those schools in the heat my whole time here, we've brought in outside fans and big industrial fans, and with the goal of keeping the air moving, much of it blowing on the kids, which is no longer an option. So we are proposing, I'm suggesting and recommending that we would consider remote days for high temperatures. I know there's already been some discussion among all of us and a question from one of you of like, what does the temperature mean? And I think when, just like on the snow days, we don't have a set amount of inches. We don't have a set this. It's really going to need to be a lot of watching of, that'll be my job, just like it always is when the weather's pertinent to school staying open or not. Understanding the heat index, certainly the impact of the humidity is going to be significant as the temperature climbs. And then making a decision. And the goal would be that that's a decision made the night before. So we know we're going into a full remote learning day. My hope, 2 years ago, we had an August into September school opening that for 2 weeks was 2 solid weeks over 90 degrees. I'm hoping with the later opening, middle of September, closer to the middle of September, that we're just going to bring an early fall in and we won't need to utilize this, but it seemed important to set the stage for it earlier than do it on a last minute decision-making process. So those are a couple of middle school highlights. Justin, do you want to add anything?
Sure. I would like to take the time just to thank Dr. Hunter for the support of these 2 pieces and want to just name explicitly that the all remote Wednesdays is something that we have to, following this meeting, communicate to the middle school families. But this was in spirit with and in concert with the CTA, but also the middle school task force had an opportunity sometime in, I think, early August to do 4 virtual site visits with 4 other surrounding middle schools. And, what we learned is, 2 of the middle schools, I believe it was Curtis, I could be wrong. I do know for a fact the other one was Melican Middle School in Northborough. We're really using that all remote day to build community and to build connections, as Lori expressed, within the different groups, and to also focus on the SEL work and the SEL goals that we have in bringing our students back. So again, I wanted just to name on behalf of the reopening task force that both the heat days and the remote Wednesdays were thoroughly discussed, vetted, and brought to Dr. Hunter's office a few weeks ago.
Thanks.
Court, can I just slip in really quickly? So we have 33 Boston families at the middle school. We have 5 going fully remote.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And is there not a plan whereby on the 2 days when students leave midday, they have a 60-minute period for transportation and lunch, and then they'll pick up some afternoon instruction? Am I correct?
Middle school is in all day on their hybrid days. The only day they were going to be half day was Wednesday. So now
Okay.
they'll be in 2 full days a week and they'll be remote learning 3 days a week.
So that potential issue is moot. Thank you. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
I'll talk on why the Wednesdays work at the high school while I transition to the high school few topics that we wanted to be sure to talk on. The high school schedule works differently, and we did a lot of great work to really watch the balance of courses, course periods, and how often they met, and make sure that it stayed balanced between the groups in the hybrid model. And in doing all of that work, it turned out that Wednesday is actually very pivotal to that staying in balance. And so it was agreed that we would leave those in place at the high school. And that will be that half-day dismissal. So the afternoons are available to teachers. However, the high school students will have independent and asynchronous work to do on Wednesday afternoons. So 2 topics, high school specific, and Mr. Mastrullo is here to answer and talk more on these. I'll just open it up. 9th grade academy is moving forward, albeit not quite the way we had anticipated, but the concepts and premises and basic structures of what we were hoping are intact, and actually maybe more important than they even were when we were in a more normal mode. And I know there's an interest in having a discussion on open campus. Tonight we're coming with the recommendation to essentially leave open campus status quo. And I want to just talk on what that will mean in this environment in a minute, but that would mean the juniors and seniors with parent permission have the option to leave. And so, Mike, do you want to take it from there?
Yes, and if you don't mind, I'm actually trying to get back in on my desktop, so let me, then I can stop.
Sorry.
That's okay. You know, it's, so if you don't mind, if you could let me in there, that'd be great, and I'm sorry, it's just, it's easier to do it this way, and I was having trouble. Perfect. Oh, yep, that's not annoying.
The magic of bad timing on Zoom. It's not the first time it's up. So we'll give him a chance to come up. There you go.
Timing was terrible. Okay.
Okay.
In terms of open campus, is that, you want me to just address that specifically?
9th grade academy and open campus.
Sure. So 9th grade academy, and Brian Miller's with me as well. Katie Stahl, the other assistant principal, who's excellent, would be here too, but it's her birthday. Happy birthday, Katie. So we gave her the meeting off. So yes, we are marching forward with 9th grade academy and really excited about it. And you know, some folks initially when we were dealing with this thought, okay, should we pivot away and put this on the shelf and come to it during another time when things are, you know, quote unquote back to normal. We felt strongly, as did a lot, it wasn't really a tough sell, that it's probably needed more now than it was even before. When you look at the structure of it, it's very similar kind of to like a middle school model. I don't like saying it that way to kids because they really don't want to hear that, but essentially you have teams of adults, the ability to, you know, work, to meet, to work and talk about kids, and, you know, to identify areas where they might need support, be it academic, social, emotional, whatever it is. And so this still allows us to do that. And if we could do it with other grades more consistently, you know, we would. It is a challenge in a high school schedule to have a whole set of teachers off at the same time to really talk about kids that they share. And so the 9th grade academy setup will allow us to do that. And admittedly, our plans pre-COVID were probably too ambitious. You know, we did a lot of brainstorming over the course of a year to really get ready to do 9th grade academy. And, you know, we were actually making the argument before we, you know, we had to leave because of COVID, that we had to scale it back. That these brainstorming activities that took place over the past year, you know, it's part of a 3 to 5 year plan. We're not going to do it all at once. And so we scaled it back even further, just to make sure that we do have a 9th grade academy. We do have structures where we can talk about kids and help them onboard them to high school, make sure they're getting their support they need, but a scaled back version of 9th grade academy. Brian, anything you want to add there?
No, I think you got it. Well said.
Sure. Any questions about that specifically, or do you want me to move on to open campus and we can talk about both? What do you want me to do, Dr. Hunt? It's up to you.
There's no questions. You can go to open campus.
Can I just comment quickly that I couldn't agree more that that 9th grade academy is even more needed this year. And so just a huge thanks for making it happen even in this scenario. I mean, it seems like an amazing way to bridge these kids into high school in such a weird high school transition. And if you hadn't done that work, it would be harder. So just much appreciated. I'm so thankful that this is in place.
Yeah, very much a team effort. Thank you for saying that. Very much a team effort, and give a lot of people a lot of credit, including Dr. Cicchetti. Robin Cicchetti has just been outstanding. We know transitioning to high school is really hard, and now it's exponentially hard because of what we're dealing with. So this will be helpful. One thing that I would add with we're trying to, we had a discussion with our leadership team looking at what teachers are remote and across the spanning the whole school, and did we want to make adjustments as a result of virtual in X department, whatever it may be. And did we want to prioritize any groups of students to have in-person learning if we could? So there were a few that we did focus on, one being ninth graders. And so we thought it's best to do if we can, to have it in person as much as possible. And if we can't, to do some shuffling. So you don't have one of the 4 cohorts with 3 virtual and maybe none on cohort 3. So yeah, there was some shuffling there. In terms of open campus, and I do have a little tidbit to add from a principal's job alike group that I took part of the other day, and a lot of schools are moving to an open campus, and they have never had one. And I took a call from a principal literally right before this meeting, because this is something I've inherited. It's been here for a long time, and it definitely takes some getting used to, but it can certainly cause some concern in general. So we have a lot of schools that are now moving to open campus because just the challenges associated with the number of kids in the building, lunch, whatever it may be. And so I know that it's a bridge a little farther for them to really get behind it and get the community to understand what it might look like. With that being said, we did look at offering open campus to all students with parental permission. And there's a sound argument to be made for both sides, and we understand that. What I've said many times during this process, including probably 5 in a staff meeting today, we're picking the best of the worst options often, and we just have to make the best of it, right? So we are going to stick with juniors and seniors. They will have open campus, and the underclassmen will not, and so they will eat on campus. Yeah, we do think we can do it and do it well in terms of lunch, but it's definitely a challenge for sure. You look at the size of our CAF and you think you can fit, my initial guess was 130. It's 86. So we're using not the lobby, which now can only seat 30. So we're using the maroon gym, the multi-purpose gym, and there's desks everywhere. So we're using desks for everything for the most part. And the rationale is they're take up less room. Easier to take away the temptation to congregate together, and lunch. I know a lot of schools went half day because lunch is a big challenge, but with open campus of upperclassmen, we can make it, but it's close.
And I'll just add, part of the student contract, which you've had access to the draft and we're still reworking it, is a piece that very clearly states we expect masks and physical distancing, and we expect all of that when they're not on the school grounds as part and enjoying those open campus privileges. We expect health and safety practices to be in place.
And if I may want to add one thing, and it's a non sequitur, so I do apologize, but I didn't address it prior. So the question was number of MECO students that have gone virtual. Our school now has 138, which is roughly 10% of the school. And we have 9 Boston students, which is roughly 14%. We have 64 students, Concord CCHS kids that live in Boston.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike, I want to say personally, I'm pleased that you and your team didn't press ahead with expanding open campus. I think it would be debatable if extending it to freshmen especially would in fact conflict with some of our freshman academy goals. One might say that one would be pitted against the other from a certain perspective.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Gordon. And so, to be honest, it's really not a philosophical discussion. It's just logistical. And the reason for even debating it was logistical. Can we actually make this work? I know we're not asking for that now. We might, sophomores maybe are a discussion for another day, but certainly not today.
Somewhere in recent documentation, maybe you can help me, or maybe it's gone now. There was reference to the notion that should a student be taught by a teacher who was remote that day, that student could choose to be remote. And the implication was they could leave the campus for a period or something.
Yeah, with parental permission, of course.
Are you sure you want to add that logistical traffic issue to your COVID precautions?
Truthfully, it's really no different than the policy is now. Now we have the remote teacher that I understand, but kids are dismissed every day for various reasons. And my guess is, Court, if it's just one free block, you're probably not going anywhere. If you have a situation where one of your in-person teachers is now out and you already had one remote teacher, now maybe you have a double block, and it would make sense maybe to go to work at a quiet space where you feel, a little better at home. So yeah, again, picking the best of the worst options. A lot of these are, logistically can be challenging, but it's about, people feeling, keeping people safe, and part of that is people feeling safe. And I think anytime we can move bodies out of the building, we should try to take advantage of it.
With some caveats. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, of course. Everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
So Mike, on lunch, it sounds like this is enabling a different scenario than I had first envisioned. I had thought that a lot of lunches were going to be in classrooms, but it sounds like with the open campus, you're setting up the cafeteria, the lobby, the gym, various spaces for lunches. Does that mean all students will have lunch in one of those spaces versus classrooms, or is it a combination? How does that look now?
It's well, I won't close the door on. We won't close the door on classrooms, but it really comes down to coverage, and between the number of teachers remote or teachers who are not present for the day, it really comes down to we could realistically have kids in a room by themselves eating lunch. Right. And we would rather just, have eyes on them. Yeah. And, we might have to utilize classrooms, but would rather not, truthfully.
Yep, makes sense.
I think too, the setup of the school makes the classrooms really challenging, having, the third and fourth floor being so removed.
Right.
And it's just not really laid out to make that an easy plan. Even if it was something we thought was a better option for some reason. So I think Mike's done a lot of hard work, and Brian, you're on my other screen, but I know you're here. They've done a lot of work to lay out the desks and get all that 6 feet apart. And how many trailers have we put furniture in for storage as of right now?
Well, I know we filled two more
already. So we're actually removing any of the cozy feeling furniture, anything that promotes socialization. I hate saying that out loud, but that's somewhat of the intent. And we're also minimizing what's in the classrooms. So only desks they need are there. So we are storing quite a bit.
Yeah, and the other, we're using a lot of rooms too. So recently the number of kids in the class went from, we were hoping 17, it ended up going down to 15 for various reasons. And that created a situation where we had 5 classrooms with an issue, meaning 15, 16, 17 or more kids, to about 45. And so it required that we use spaces for classrooms right now that we never do. And it went from having a lot of open rooms to less. So we have some rooms that are open that are going to be used as teacher spaces, and an opportunity for them to go and work quietly, because we don't have the lunchroom. We don't have as many that we can accommodate in their office spaces. So, we're trying to utilize some classrooms for teacher spaces. If we had more, maybe they're pretty big. The rooms are pretty busy, let's just say that. And last thing I'll say on the rooms, we are utilizing corner rooms for teacher rooms. If you imagine a traffic flow pattern, that's one way. Once you get into a corner, it's you create a challenge, right? You can't go in and out one way. So, but we do have a few of those with a plan to address that.
Right. So all the schools have really been reallocating space. Today, actually, we had the fire department and building inspector through because both bodies need to permit that for us. That went really successfully. It ranges everything from specialist space being repurposed at some of the elementary schools, the cafeterias at the elementary schools being set up for individual service provision and segmented off so kids and service providers can work together, to what Mike's describing of having a look at the space for each class, each section at the high school based on the number of kids and make sure it was in a setting that was big enough to provide for it. So lots of very detailed planning happening.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's obvious, but by cohorting, you're really separating it into two chunks so you can make it manageable in terms of space. It doesn't break down. If a class of 30 doesn't break down nicely, neat into a 15-15, obviously. So
right.
It can create some challenges.
So I thought I'd segue us to coverage, which is connected to some of what we just talked about. And by coverage, I'm at a high level here, and I tried to hit a number of categories that we need to be sure we're addressing. So you'll see substitutes is one I want to just talk on, and some of our strategies there. Making sure we've got coverage for nurses. We see an issue that could happen there that we want to be ahead of. And it was on one of the lists that we be sure we talk about coverage for the administrators, which I'm actually grateful to be asked about. For substitutes, we've talked on not bringing in per diem subs, so we're going to be working within. I know we've been working on cohorting. We're using that word too much. So we're assigning essentially some of the support staff to certain groups of professional staff so that they're linked up essentially by team or grade level and are going to be available on to cover limited amounts of people, not necessarily the whole building. We met today with the high school tutors. They're actually going to work with us to have a duty pool. They've got really creative and working through their schedules and making sure their service to kids stays intact, but also freeing up some flexible time during the day that if there's a need, we can on a period at a time ask them to help. So we're building the structures. We're going to have to work through how that all goes. I would definitely add to that. This piece is going to be really interesting because if a classroom quarantines, for example, I think we're going to end up just flipping the switch to go to a remote model there. The teacher will be home, the kids will be home. I can't see a reason why we wouldn't do that, or at least try it at the onset if that becomes a situation. One other piece I want to, just for fiscal purposes and coverage and supervision and safety, we are providing and hiring additional support staff at the middle and high school so that where kids are now with remote teachers, there's going to be additional supervision available to them at different degrees depending on the age group. The middle school will be more tightly supervised, while the high school in slightly bigger groups. I've been working with the nurse leaders very closely on support to them. Our recommendation, and coming out of the realization that it could happen almost more likely in that environment that they end up quarantined because of the number of kids they're going to see. So my recommendation to you tonight is that we onboard one of our daily per diem subs who works with us regularly and has for years. Onboard her on a per diem basis at the start of the school year so that she can work with, essentially we're going to start at the high school, partly because there's a willingness by the high school nurse leader to train her, and because there's more kids there than anywhere else. And have her just learn all the safety protocols, all the processes right at the beginning of the school year, and then keep her available for different needs as they arise, but also for support to the other schools. as other issues come up or if there's nurse coverage to be needed. It's an issue, you know, substitute nurses we've struggled with pre-COVID. We've talked with all of our sub nurses, including the one that is willing to do this for us. And they're equally getting stretched to other opportunities, other districts having needs and hiring them permanently, or just their own childcare issues. So the pool of substitute nurses feels like it's going to be smaller than an already small pool. So we're trying to build a proactive plan there. I think part of our COVID resources could go towards those costs and build us in the buffer that we would need. As far as the administrators, this I think
quickly on the nurse.
Oh,
Forgive me. Just for clarity, you still refer to this nurse as per diem, but this is a per diem daily until further notice, 2 districts, correct?
so she's going to start at the high school because Lisa's going to train her and onboard her, and because that's where the biggest number of kids are.
Right.
But when the needs come up at the other K-8 schools, we will certainly move her over there. And the per diem allows us to charge wherever she is based on the per diem. And essentially we're categorizing her as a long-term substitute without a finite end date, which we actually do a lot because we aren't always sure when teachers are going to return.
So
And if we close, we don't need her on the
the
payroll.
assignment is daily until further notice, and the payment arrangement is per diem.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And she's really excited by that. This is a woman who's really excited, loves to do this kind of work for us. So
We're fortunate. School nurses are exceptional in their field.
indeed. And in a COVID environment, I feel very fortunate that this was something she found appealing.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt there.
No, glad to have the question. When the screen shares on, I can't see you all, so yeah, just yell out. In terms of administrators, we are, I think, you know, with the work you all supported, so that we've got assistant principals at every elementary school, and we have assistant principals now well in place at middle and high school, and the leadership pieces available. I know we've got redundancy here and availability and backup, and that starts all the way to me. I know Jared and Kristen can run with it quite easily. So I feel really good that we've got options here so that if any of us were to need to disengage for a while, we've got the backup to do that. And I think all the planning has been really cohesive this summer, so everyone's up to speed. Just we work regularly with the assistant principals there at a lot of our planning meetings and have certainly been highly engaged in the building level planning. So I think that's in good shape.
All right, so just to lighten the evening, Jared, would it be easy?
Easy to pick up my
Absolutely.
I highly doubt it, but I'm sure you and Kristen would step up and do your best.
Oh, there's no question. They no question they could.
All right.
My next topic, and I'll just note them rather than show you the slide, since that is hard to see everyone. The next topic was about schedules, and I'll let certainly we can talk a little more detail of whatever you're interested in. Student schedules and our current status on that. Embedded in that is the passing time piece at the middle and high school and how we've built in those structures to allow for safety and social distancing practices. It seemed like there was interest, particularly in the specialists, and by that I mean art, music, some of those specialty areas, both, and they range obviously, right? Elementary looks one way, middle another, and high school different. So do any of the principals want to talk a little on their scheduling and where you're at with that? Anything you're still working on? I think we're in pretty good shape. This has been a huge part of the MOA work we've done with the union leadership, and I think we're pretty tight for the morning at the elementary, afternoon remote. Specials will all be in the afternoon remotely. We're finishing that schedule up, and kids will come all together to be with the specialists regularly. Middle school, they're embedded in the schedule as they always have been. I will say we're getting really, the music part, K-12, the music part is a big discussion because of the limitations. We could end up just doing a lot of remote work there because it's very limited what we can do in person. That's evolving. And
Lauren?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you speak a little bit to how you've reconfigured the 6-day week at the middle school, or any other scheduling configurations that didn't lend themselves to how you're going to distribute specials now?
Yeah, I think you're going to hear the answer is they're pretty status quo, but Justin, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, we actually were following our 6-day schedule.
Okay.
So if I could just make a point about all the school schedules, probably the most important thing for students is that no matter what mode we're in, at elementary, middle school, or high school, or preschool, the schedule remains the same. So if students are physically going to school or if they're zooming in from home, the day starts and ends at the same time. The periods at each level start and end at the same time. So we did this so that there was consistency, so that students would get used to the rhythm of the school day and just stick with it. We call it an executive function skill, but being able to plan that all your work is going to happen in the same space. You know, I want to say if we're starting all in or hybrid, and then we have to go remote at some point in the school year, that would happen seamlessly, because that's not true. You know, there will be some bumps in the road, but in terms of a schedule, we were very, very careful at every level to make sure they were absolutely consistent, so there aren't any changes. You know, passing time got lengthened at the middle school and high school when we're in person, and that's great because that gives kids a break when we're in a virtual world from being on synchronous learning. So just, you know, consistent.
Hey,
What I
Kristen,
think
or I'm not.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just ask a quick question. I don't know if it would be to, I don't know really who it would be to, but when I think about grades like 4 to 8, kids that are, you know, have homework, and I'm thinking about really even mostly the middle school level, those kids being in front of a computer for 5-6 hours a day, is there going to be any discussion with teachers, or will it be up to individual teachers about how we're going to manage homework? I'm just thinking of, like, you know, a little teenager doing, you know, an additional 3, 4, or I don't know how many hours these middle schoolers do on top of, you know, what is going to be really sort of a lot of screen fatigue by the end of the day.
I'll start that, and then if Kristen wants to jump in, she can. I actually envision, because nobody wants them on the screen all day, so I actually envision there'll be some direct instruction and screen time related activities, but then I think a lot of the periods are going to have other things going on, and I actually see homework as just wrapping up the other things you probably started during the period. I think it's, you know, it's going to evolve a little bit here, but I don't think it's going to look exactly the same, just because the models are so varied from what we're all used to.
Right. I just didn't know if there was going to be like any policy sort of wrapped around it, like just thinking about, you know, kids wrapping up the day at 2 PM and then still doing homework at 9. Just seems like a funny year. I'm very pro homework, but.
Yeah, we don't disagree. We left it essentially that the homework would be that follow-up to what they started. So it might have to evolve a little bit. At the high school, we said 30 minutes per course, but I don't think it's going to be the way it felt before. Where so I think that might be, I think that'll be one of the pieces that there's a feedback loop on as we get settled and stable and into probably October, which is one of my last topics. I think that'll be a piece we look at and how that's playing out as we get the basics and essentials off and running.
Right.
Yeah, and I would just mention in response, Alexa, to your question about Zoom fatigue, because, you know, as someone who's been working 10 and 12 hours a day all summer on Zoom, I can attest to it, as have all the other administrators. And certainly that becomes worse for kids, and it gets worse when you look at the younger kids. So that was part of our emphasis on really trying to bring everybody back. So in our memos of agreement with the union leadership, we are really, really clear about how much time each teacher would be working with their kids, particularly in the middle school and high school where there is Zooming during the regular school day. So we have 35 to 65% of the time that a kid would be in class virtually, they would be on Zoom, meaning you know, let's say they have 5 class meetings over the course of a week for a certain class, the teacher would plan about half of those to be via Zoom. And it's really discipline specific how they want to do that. So for example, a math teacher might want to open up, do a little direct teaching, and then send kids on their way to work independently and come back after a half an hour back onto Zoom and check in about questions and so forth. But an English teacher, for example, or any humanities teacher who might want a bigger, longer discussion might have one day a whole period discussion, all 47 minutes, but then the next day have them working asynchronously on a writing project, for example. So we were really, really careful to make sure that kids weren't Zooming all day because it is so exhausting. And I have to say, just in terms of our negotiations around this topic with our union leadership, everybody was completely on the same page and very, very collaborative, just trying to figure out what was best for kids.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Scheduling.
I knew you'd have that covered.
I have a scheduling question. For students at the high school, when you have students zooming into an instruction while it happens live at the high school, how would the interface of that schedule look like? Would the students see the schedule, the Zoom schedule and the instruction schedule? Would all of the students see it? Where it would be an easy switch off to remote learning if you know somebody got a runny nose and they couldn't attend? Like what interface would look like with the students if you can touch on this? And also, how would the small group breakout work with the teacher look like in that whole scheduling scheme? Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So the teachers are, and I keep on using the term zooming in. I think I need some different vernacular, but students will be zooming in from home, and we're fortunate to have a lot of technology. I hope this answers your question, and if it doesn't, let me know. Where they can use the desktop and project it on the large screen in front of the class. And so kids they're in a Zoom environment. I mean, we were doing meetings like that today, Brian, Katie, and I, and some others. So to Kristen's point, the schedule is the same, and it is a really simple transition because let's not forget, even the kids in hybrid are virtual, right? Part of the time. Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. The thing I would add is that we listened to the feedback from last year that some of our students, particularly those struggling with executive functioning, struggled to know where to find the link. So we've worked to standardize that like in one exact place in every Google Classroom. So we worked with the tech leaders on that piece. And then the other piece that I would add just sort of in the pedagogical frame was we've had some teachers talk about doing some nice pairing with the hybrid, with a student who's virtual, with the student who's in class. Because, right, this normal like shoulder work that you might do in class, you can't do anymore. But I can have a really nice one-on-one conversation if I'm in school and I'm paired with someone who's virtual that day. So using breakout spaces or something like that.
Yeah. Brian, help me understand a little bit more. I go through a day hopping from link to link to link. You're telling me that this is going to be much easier by way of a single portal for an individual student that then puts them into the mix that fits their schedule. Am I over-interpreting, or is that about right?
That would be really advanced. We can't get there, but if you picture Google Classroom, basically every time a kid logs in, they have a tile for each class, and every kid's in Google Classroom 100 times a day. So just if you went to my physics class at the right when you click on my physics class, right at the top, you'll have my Zoom link. We had teachers sort of sharing the Zoom link multiple ways last year, some via email, some via calendar invite. This year, it just will be there for everybody. And that'll be nice too for our support staff, because most of our support staff are also in those Google classrooms. So they'll be able to join in on the instruction when helpful and necessary.
So I know I'm in the weeds, but I go from Google Classroom to the tile that represents your class. Is that a hot link to Zoom from there?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
You just click it.
That's not bad. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say it's very helpful that we're a Google school. That's one, using the Google Suite, and every teacher uses Google Classroom. In addition to that, there are, there's now a Zoom add-on for Chrome right in Google Calendar. And we're also using Google scheduling calendar for scheduling extra help. So you can assign slots that are available as a staff member, and then students could then sign up for a spot to do extra help. And you could, I mean, it is leveraging the technology, right? There are some positives coming from this.
So as long as we're here, save us coming back to it. I'm a parent at home, or I'm a student at home, and I'm feeling helpless. Where do I go?
In terms
because with tech issues.
Yeah, so we have there's several support staff in the school that they could go to. They could go directly to their teacher. There's usually students that also do work as support staff, so that could be done virtually. So yeah, there are ways. I mean, it might be tough in real time to get it solved like that in some cases, but for the most part, there should be enough support.
So we don't have an old-fashioned tech line.
Well, we did have a tech help desk. Peter, do you want to add any? I don't know if you have anything, but we did have a help desk. Truthfully, I haven't got down that road of how we're going to make it now exist in a virtual environment. Honestly,
I would add, we also worked with that Calendly. So I don't know if you know about Calendly, but we've used that add-on for a few of our teachers. So our guidance counselors and also our IT folks. So it's really easy to book an appointment with them. And then you can just say, I need help with my computer, and whether that can be done virtually or not, obviously depends on the nature of the problem. But we do have two IT folks that's their whole job, is to help us.
It is, and they know that this year in particular, with how we traditionally run things, they've got to be somewhat glued to their email and responsive, because the students know who they are and how to reach them, and so do the staff. And a lot of that will now come from email with people not in the building. So they're just going to be prepared, and they know they have to be on top of things.
That's reassuring. Thank you very much.
I'm just curious, do you have a ticket system that parents and students can access?
We have an internal ticket system for students and staff. We've not opened it up externally. It's something that is possible we consider. And certainly if email becomes unwieldy and not functional, we could do that.
Somebody who does it, it's beginning to get to the point where
Yeah. No, I understand. It's certainly possible.
I just wanted to add something because it feels like technologically we're talking about the high school, but the one-touch system to get into Zoom synchronous learning is the same at all the schools. That was our goal. So it was one of the reasons that we adopted Seesaw and Google Classroom at the elementary level, was that they go into their classroom and they really just have to click one button and they're right into their Zoom. So that was our goal. And I wanted to go back to a question that Eva asked in the beginning, because it's a huge difference between the spring and what we're starting now, which is in terms of student accountability. So every teacher in every class will take attendance. So that is true if they are working synchronously live in Zoom. There are ways to take attendance automatically. The screen fills right into a spreadsheet for taking attendance. But it's also true for when kids are working asynchronously, meaning they're in their Google Classroom, but the teacher is recording that they're answering a question or something like that. So unlike the spring where we were released by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education from that accountability, we now are at 100% accountability in terms of attendance, which we're really excited about.
I think Google's adding in a whole bunch of functionality every day, including an attendance record, including breakout sessions and things like that. But I had a question about this pairing up of of in-school students with remote students. Have you tested how that works so if you have 10 kids in the classroom and they all have their headphones on and they're communicating in their like breakout group with a remote learner, have you figured out the acoustic element of that within the classroom?
So Sarah, to be honest, it's really more of, it came out of like just a brainstorming session, right, from with staff. So how it will work in practice will probably look differently with each class. I guess how I envisioned it, and I could be wrong, is less about pairing them up in real time and more about just pairing them up in general to help, right? I mean, we do have the same issue that even the younger kids in terms of too much screen time. And I understand it's, age appropriate. It's easier for older students to do it for longer. However, we don't want kids sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours a day either. And so theoretically, you're going to miss something that was said in that class. And that's the idea, I think, between pairing.
I would add too, to make the most of the in-person time, that as a teacher, I would be most excited to ask the students in front of me to close their computers and really make the most of that in-person time. But as Mike just said, time outside of the school day is when the two alphabet groups and the full remote student can be connected.
Could I ask a question about help time for high school students? Because grades do matter in high school. They're so imperative. So how help and scheduling help for those students that might have a problem following the classroom or the curriculum would look like?
Yeah, and so that's really, I spoke to it a little bit, and I think it will vary for different kids. So we have the Mark and the Circ where kids can have it scheduled in there for math support or English or social studies support, or they could just drop in. That has been the traditional model. So that model no longer exists for obvious reasons, right? We can't have a drop in anymore. So if it's not scheduled, if it's not scheduled for you, you're a student on an IEP. If you're not an IEP and it's not scheduled, then that's why we want to utilize a booking feature with teachers and using the online platform to do so, because it's gonna be more challenging without those supports. In addition, there's going to be people coming and going everywhere, and people in different rooms, and so we're trying to really just be more efficient. It's a better use of time. Instead of trying to schedule something over email, teacher has, let's just say, B block off, or decides to dedicate some time after school, whatever it may be. Students could sign up for slots of extra support.
So I just have, since we're kind of on this topic, can you describe at the middle school and the high school what the classroom logistics will be for a teacher in person or in the school, and for a teacher who's remote?
Sure. We're actually having tomorrow about 10 students come in for a simulation. And we have about 2 students who are going to be remote. And we actually have a in-person teacher who's going to be there for the simulation, and then a remote teacher who's going to be there for the simulation. So we're creating this video to show our parents next week and to show our faculty and staff when the professional development days commence and begin on Thursday of this week. But to answer your question, the in-person teacher, and there's different ways to do this, but the in-person teacher would have that alphabet group, let's say it's A through K, in front of them. Mm-hmm. At the middle school, the alphabet groups are about 9 to 10. And then about the alphabet group that is full remote would be zooming in, as we often say, and their faces would be on the 80-inch smartboard in front of the class. I think ideally the camera would be pointed to the class so that the at-home students, the 1 or 2 fully remote students in that alphabet group, are seeing their peers in the class and seeing the teacher deliver the instruction, the in-person teacher, of course. Now, there might be a beginning of the class where the other alphabet group might be synced in as well. But for the most part, that half of the alphabet group would be doing things independently during that time at home. Now, for the all remote teacher, we would have a student supervisor who's in the room. The remote teacher would be on the 80-inch smartboard along with the 1 or 2 all remote students. And the 9 or 10 of that alphabet would be in front of them.
So, oh, sorry, Cynthia, if you had a follow-up.
No, go ahead, and then I'll follow up if I have.
So my answer would be identical for the first part of that in terms of the experience for a teacher, kids zooming in. It is a little different at the high school when the teacher's remote. So we have dedicated spaces where kids will be able to do some work. The auditorium being one, the language lab being another, and the cafeteria when it's not being utilized. Also, we do have a few other room gym and multi-purpose, but and really the between free periods, kids with free periods, lunch, remote teachers, and just absences, and then the utilizing of a lot of classrooms based on the number change. This is the idea of having one adult in each kid is just not feasible. With each class is not feasible. We do encourage, we did buy some, but encourage kids to bring headphones every day too, so they can, they can zoom in and have their earbuds in. Yeah.
So let me just confirm. So there will not, so if your teacher is remote, we currently don't envision that we have the ability to have individual classrooms with those students in them.
Yeah.
I think Justin is.
Yeah, the middle school does. The middle school.
Yeah, we have interviews for 14 what we're called student supervisors. We have close to 20 who applied, and we're doing interviews for those positions. Thursday, I have 3 teachers and an assistant principal who's doing interviews on Thursday.
Wow, how come I only got 6 applicants for mine?
So Mike, I'm just thinking in terms of equity, some kids do have the capability either to drive themselves home so they don't have to sit in the auditorium. Learning into a laptop is certainly not a desired, it's just not ergonomically. I don't think it's really a good setup. I'm sure you would agree. So maybe you should test it out, because you're gonna have kids with different classes, and then they're gonna be talking potentially into their computer, even if they have headphones on. The other thing is, if you're Zooming, you can't really switch easily to a screen to look at materials that you're supposed to in that classroom, where at home, you could have another device or something.
Yeah.
So, I think we're gonna have to be really flexible with students and families about coming and going, or maybe setting them up in a better place other than the auditorium. I know you're really tight on space, but.
Yeah, honestly, it's a good point, Cynthia. I think with the exception of the lunches, there's a desk somewhere for them.
Right.
That the challenge is lunch.
Right. And a semi-related question, where can students go to study? I mean, would the auditorium be an option kind of a thing?
All those spaces I just named, yeah, also the same.
Okay.
And then some of the breakout spaces, Cynthia, we took out all of those chairs in the breakout space and just have put in about 12 to 18 desks in each of those spaces. Same with the library. We took out all the tables, but there's be about 25 to 30 student desks just in the library too.
And then just another logistical question. Are we going to be using lockers or no? Okay. So kids just have to sort of carry their stuff around with them.
Well, yes, and to be honest, Cynthia, so last year we mandated it for 9th graders because no students just don't use them.
Right.
And so we were kind of shifting to seeing it about making kids do it and see how that went. So
right.
It's not we did they would have to notify us if they wanted one. We were assigning one to every kid and then they weren't using it. So it's not a big shift in practice.
Mr. Strullo, many teachers at the high school, how many teachers will be working remotely where you will need those student supervisors?
How many teachers?
I think of the 16 are teaching remotely, right? Is
Yeah.
getting this correctly?
Yeah, and there could be a few pending, so I can tell you right now. So yes, roughly 16.
Is that including the counselors, or is this just the teacher's number?
That includes the counselors. Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple counselors.
Mhm.
Any other questions? I was going to shift topics pretty dramatically to transportation. So before we leave the teaching and learning, I just make sure.
At some point, I'm going to want to speak to PE and athletics whenever you want, Dr. Hunter.
PE we might do now as part of this conversation. Athletics is probably separate for after that. Anybody want to talk on PE?
Well,
Sure.
What was in the draft handbook looked pretty clear to me. I think it really relates more to athletics, my questions.
Okay. I mean, I'll just answer that quickly, is that we don't have that answer yet. We've certainly gotten the MIA guidance. What I would like to do, I have a meeting at the end of the week, Mike and I and the other league superintendents and principals. There's going to be a discussion about what the league considers safe. And then we need to come back and have a discussion locally about that. So we know the starting point is what's been released. I would like to have that regional conversation first and then come back to you as to what we think the local decision will be.
Before we leave teaching and learning behind, then, in the drafts, I don't know if this is directed to you, Kristen, or principals, or you, Lori. Some of our language in the drafts is aspirational still, when I think people want some declarative guidelines from us. And some of it suggests extraordinary autonomy on the part of teachers. And I'm just curious, one, do they want that? And two, is it instructionally sound? For example, we recommend that teachers move forward with grade level skills. It doesn't sound as definitive as I'd want as a parent. I would share that with you. In a few places, I think could be more definitive and give people comfort. They might not agree with our approach, but at least they'd be more certain about what it was.
Yeah, so there are 3 truths when it comes to the curriculum in Concord that are holding true for this pandemic opening that we're having. One is that Concord parents absolutely, without question, want Concord high-level curriculum. So when we were looking, for example, at the remote learning, they didn't want outside teachers coming in. They didn't want curriculum from some software program. I think people value the uniqueness of our curriculum and recognize that we've worked really hard, even in a hybrid or remote environment, to keep the learning experiences of high quality. So, and that will continue to be true. So that's the first truth, is Concord parents want Concord curriculum taught by Concord teachers. The second truth is that the Department of Education in the spring released us from the obligation of covering all the standards in the curriculum frameworks. So they sort of narrowed it down and prioritized for us what they call power standards or priority standards. So in each subject area out of all 12, it's clear to us how to prioritize what teachers will teach. So content-wise, there's no autonomy. We're very, very clear. We have curriculum committees that meet about every 5 years in a certain discipline, pre-K to 12, and we outline exactly how we're going to approach the curriculum standards so that every student in every school gets the opportunity to learn every piece of content that's deemed important. So what is also true, the third truth is that we're really clear about what curriculum we're teaching. So what's the content and the set of skills that we want every student at Concord to leave every single school with knowing. And we have systems of remediation if they're not. What we leave in capable hands is the how. So how are you going to address these standards? And I have been just amazed at the creative things that teachers came up with in the spring. You know, the fact that we still released the Blandings turtles and we still did the abolitionist trunks in 8th grade and so on and so forth. People switched gears pretty quickly to make our milestone events still occur. And I have no doubt that now with 3 months of planning, we've run over 35 professional development courses that teachers will do even better at doing that. I've been spending a lot of my time right now approving the curriculum summer work that teachers have done. So I've probably seen 100 plans from 150 teachers on their curriculum and the changes that they've made. And I'm honestly looking forward to it. I think in some ways we are taking the crisis of a pandemic and turning it into an opportunity for improving instruction and engagement for all students. So I have no doubt about how our teachers are rising to this challenge. And I think one of the reasons that people want to come to Concord is because of that freedom to approach the subject in a way that they think makes the best impact for students.
So I certainly don't disagree with any of that, as you probably well know. I do, however, suggest to this leadership team that the language around autonomy, we recommend that teachers move forward. We recommend that teachers choose pedagogies. We recommend that we focus on pedagogical approaches that are reasonable. I would hope that's balanced with an equal emphasis on the standards and benchmarks are fully in place.
Absolutely, and that's part of our system of supervision and evaluation. You know, the principals and department chairs all supervise all the teachers, and standard 1 out of 4 standards is making sure that teachers are helping students reach those content and skill goals. Standard 2 is making sure that all students have the opportunity to do that. So one thing actually that we were released from in the spring was that system of supervision and evaluation, and it's now clearly back in place for the fall. Of course, we've had to make some adjustments to that.
So I am very favorably inclined toward the remarkable capacities of the teachers. I'm really directing this at language in the draft, which is going to have a rather formal quality to it very soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? And again, like Court, I'm not quite certain who to direct it to. It's kind of a 3-part question, I guess. For children in the younger grades, I guess K to 5, are we still going to be able to, in that first chunk of the year, be able to conduct sort of those very standard evaluations that we do of all students? I know that they'll be in the classroom. And then my second question is, do we anticipate at the conclusion of those evaluations that because we're experiencing more here than just traditional, I think the vernacular is like summer slide, that we may have more students needing sort of small group interventions? And I guess the third part is, if that is in fact the case, do we have the systems in place and the capacity to sort of handle what may be a larger number of students needing, you know, more individualized support, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer the assessment questions, and then maybe the principals can jump in on the system of support for individual students, since that's something that they oversee. But in terms of the assessment, you know that we give assessments to every student, K through about grade 9 or 10, in reading, writing, math, and then we've also added recently the social emotional component in grades 6 through 10. And we're investigating a tool to add that social emotional to the elementary school as well. So how we do those assessments in the past when we're in person is basically one-on-one. So one student with one instructor, and it's a very sophisticated tool that we use for looking at kids reading. So you get a lot of information from those assessments that it can inform your instruction. So mostly teachers want to do those assessments themselves. So in a remote environment, we're looking at different tools or some of the same tools, but used differently. There certainly will be an online component where kids are taking an assessment in reading, writing, and math. And we're using the same assessment. It's called STAR 360, K to grade 9, to look at all students and where they are in those subject areas. And then can base our selection of who really needs that, what we call tier 2 support outside the classroom from a specialized instructor. So the tool that we use, STAR 360, it's a good tool. It's not quite as sophisticated as like a one-to-one in person, but it'll get us sort of our first cut of who's really struggling. As you said, this has been a long time without a lot of individualized instruction. So we anticipate that there are going to be more kids who are struggling. And then, the different schools have different systems for having that small group instruction occur.
I have a follow-up for Kristen Herbert, since I have your attention here. I have I would like to see if you could expand on that. You've touched on professional training. If you please expand on the professional training for teachers when it comes to the use of technology by teachers and the remote learning training, and standardizing how teachers across all classes in high school would communicate and would use the technology so it's predictable for the students.
Yeah, that's a great question, Eva. So our professional development was in 4 areas, and probably the most sought after by our teachers was the sort of straight on true technology. This is how you use this particular tool, be it Google Classroom or something like Pear Deck or Amplify or any of those curricula. So along with that though, and really exciting part of this is the different kind of instruction you can do. So if you've heard of the flipped classroom or inquiry-based instruction or adaptive learning, that's much more capable, possible in this kind of environment where we can use these powerful technological tools. So luckily, each school has a technology specialist, and they offered classes on blended remote learning, for example, and those were incredibly well subscribed. Just to round out the picture, the other 2 kinds of courses that we had, one was in social emotional learning. So our expert, Rachel Polliner, worked with our teachers on how do you build relationships, because education is relational. It's about the relation between the teacher and the student. And the student has to feel cared about and known before they're going to be comfortable to take a risk and learn. So how do you build relationships in a remote environment? Because it looks different. And the idea that Brian brought up actually came up through that class, which was pairing a kid at home with a kid in the classroom as one way to build those connections. So, and then the 4th set of courses was on cultural competency. So even in this environment where building relationships is harder, how do I become an anti-racist educator or further myself on the path? So those were kind of our 4 big sets of courses, and all really, really subscribed.
Okay, if you're ready, we're gonna turn gears here to transportation. I had titled the slide "Getting to and from School" because that's a big bunch of stuff now. It always was, but it certainly is now. So this, John Arenas here, who's working in our transportation office.
So I'm sorry, his video is disabled. Chris, I just texted you. John Arena.
Okay, thanks, Jared. And I know too, the principals have been working very hard on arrival and dismissal processes. Because the bus capacity is down, we certainly have a lot more to manage in terms of drop off and pickup. And then if there's any related parking comments or topics, I'll just say right off, the high school, because the kids are not all coming, we're able to split the spots so that they can split them over the hybrid days and share the spot essentially. So we've actually, in a really not preferable way, taken the edge off of the parking issue at the high school. So more kids will get spots, but that's because they're only in the building half time. So
Lori, just to
be careful what you wish for is what I'll end on that comment. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just kudos to the Concord Police Department for coming out and supporting all of us in the buildings. They reviewed our plans, gave us lots of good ideas, and in the end, I think we all have, they may be complex, but I think they, speaking with the other principals, I think they're the safest and most efficient way of having kids arrive and leave the campus.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm going to extend that shout out. We're being so well supported by all the town departments in everything we're doing here, whether it's the building inspector and fire department today, the police in terms of drop off and pickup, Concord Recreation, Concord Health officials. It's extensive, and one email and I have them back at my fingertips for something. So we're just so grateful. John, why don't we turn it over to you? And John's probably got the challenge of the hour here as he reroutes the kids that are going to use the buses. So we'll let you update us on that.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me, and good evening, everyone. So this is just an ongoing transportation, just an ongoing cycle on a minute-by-minute basis, like anything else. Constant updates, constant changes. We're just, my office staff, we're just going with the fly here. We're making all the necessary adjustments to bus routes for student safety, driver safety, social distancing, with plenty of PPE on the buses. And we are fairly confident, very confident that this is going to run as smooth as possible. The only thing that's going to put the hiccup into it will be the traffic in town, which I'm planning for that too as well, and hopefully have buses arriving on time to school. And it's really important that the kids get to school on time and are not rushing to get to a class. So that's a big part of what we're doing here at the office and in routing, and just making sure everyone can get a seat that should have a seat and get them there safely.
Thanks, John. And some other silver lining, there's very little traffic in Concord right now. So we're going to hope that sticks for a little bit longer.
Yes.
In terms of anyone want to talk on an example of your drop off and arrival, Matt, Naomi, we both got fairly complicated.
I want to first just thank John, you and your drivers. None of us have forgotten how critical transportation is. Any of us who didn't know it learned the first day we sent a kindergartner off and realized that that was the first person to whom we entrusted our child. And it's also the last person they see every day from school. So the way your drivers surround our kids' day and protect them in the period of time when they're most exposed, when they're not under the care of a teacher under the roof of a school. That's in your hands and the hands of your team, and we're very indebted to you this year, like every other year. Thank you. And we also know that your scheduling complexity, which is extreme in a normal year, is probably doubled this year, I would guess. So thanks.
Oh, thank you. And I can't say enough for my team. and the support that they have from all you folks, administration right down the school committee, that they feel supported and they are so passionate to their job, and their caringness toward those children and all the students is part of their own family.
Yeah. Thank you.
Does anyone want to give just a quick thumbnail of the complexity of your drop off and pickup?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So we have essentially, because we expect to have about the same number of buses, but probably double the number of cars. And we don't have a ton of sort of idling space on the school grounds. And so what we did, and this was, as Matt said, in collaboration with Concord Police, but we've basically designed a drop off and pickup that keeps traffic moving as much as possible. So we've eliminated any parking, and we're doing it, I hear a lot of people call it camp style. And so we have grade levels. They're going to be stationed on our field at, socially distanced, appropriately socially distanced. And, one of the benefits of this earlier dismissal for elementary schools is that we really do have all of our staff available, even the ones who work part-time. And so it's going to be sort of an all hands on deck situation where cars are pulling up. No one is getting out of their cars. No adults are getting out of their cars, and our staff are bringing kids to the cars. And we have worked with Concord Police to make sure, at least in our in Alcott's situation, that Laurel Street is not the traffic. They've helped us adjust some of the traffic patterns a little bit. They've made suggestions for families only entering by turning right off of Laurel Street, and when they exit, only going straight and then turning to the right again, so we don't have cross traffic. But basically the big change is that families are not getting out of their cars, and we're bringing kids to their parents, as opposed to having families sort of flood our field and come to their kids, which is what the previous routine was.
So I would say at Thoreau, we're following suit. I think that we have one of the more complicated settings for which there's zero parking for parents whatsoever, so that we are prioritizing parents first coming through the bus lane in the morning, and then in the afternoon parents will go after the buses, so that we're able to manage the flow of traffic, keep cars moving, no one's parking, and really just focusing on moving folks along as quickly as possible.
And at Willard, again, to reduce congestion and keep social distancing. But I think also a great example of collaboration and flexibility. The afternoon pickup will be one where we'll phase classes exiting particular doors based on their grade level. And the staff have committed to parking over at White Pond. And kudos to the staff for being collaborative in that and being so open-minded. And thank you to the Concord Rec for making it available. And thanks to Russ for committing to having it plowed in the winter. And then what we're going to do is we're going to phase out over 15 minutes cars by particular grade backing into spots, and then classroom teachers and other members of staff delivering students to cars along the grass and asphalt walkways. So it's going to be complex. We're going to need to refine it over time. But I think, after looking at all the different options, it's by far the best. And we're committed to making it a safe way for kids to leave the campus.
So there aren't too many advantages of having two middle school buildings, but this is one where our sixth grade building on Tuesdays and Fridays only have 87 families, 87 students. And we have a separate drop-off already at the Peabody campus. So we're in a really good place there. Our Monday and Thursday group, the A through K, is 104. The Sanborn campus is a little bit more complex, and it's a very busy road. So we had Concord Police and John with us. I lost track on time. I think it was last week we did one last final. John was kind enough to bring a bus as well. We're looking to, use the visitor parking, since there are no visitors, and turn that into the bus drop off, and basically flip the 2 spaces and use the front of the school for the parent guardian drop off. My numbers, Monday and Thursday, there's 213 students on the Sanborn campus, and Tuesday and Friday, there's 198. And again, some of those students will still be taking a bus.
And I mean, the similar thing at CC, that we've swapped where the parents and buses will drop off. So we, like someone else said, that we anticipate having more cars than buses. So we use the cars, we'll use the big loop road, and John and his team will use the back by the cafeteria, which is actually how the building was originally designed.
I have a question about the screening. How do you, so if a student gets dropped off, is there a way to check that their screening form has been filled out before the parent drives away?
Yeah, so the intent of the screenings is that we will ask families to fill those out an hour before. They're in Aspen, so we will have reports immediately available to us. Nicole's actually in IT is building an auto reminder that's going to go out to the people who haven't done it at the hour mark. So hopefully that'll drop it again. And then, you know, I don't know if we're going to get them right at the door of the building, but it won't be long before the office and the nurses are going to be able to see who hasn't. And then they're going to need to address the fact that the screener wasn't done before school. So I don't know if it'll be right at the door. It'll probably be, it might be a little bit into the day, but in my perfect world, which I don't know is how we'll start, we'll be on the phone before school starts even to say you didn't do the screener. I don't know if we'll hit that immediately when we open, but that's the goal actually, is to communicate with families beforehand.
Lori, is it possible to have a paper screener? I know our experience with summer camp was very similar this past week. So if you haven't done it online, they do have a paper to fill out by the parent before the child gets out of the car. So what is our alternative if that doesn't get done on Aspen?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the paper screener. We definitely have already looked at a couple of employee groups that we would use paper for because of some different, you know, ways they operate that the Aspen piece wouldn't work. The sheer volume does really mean we need to look at Aspen as the primary mode for students though, because otherwise we're one child at a time trying to check off who's actually complied versus Aspen, which is going to give us a report at our fingertips. So I think we need to continue to drive people in that way as much as possible. And we'll go from there in terms of alternates, but the alternates need to be very few exceptions or else we're not going to be able to have a useful tool.
So what happens if the screener has not been filled out, or if there is a pattern of not having, filling it out? Do we admit the child? Do we not admit the child? What are the consequences?
Right. So, you know, early on, there'll be some reminders to do it and some follow-up, and definitely be holding parents accountable. If there's a pattern there, then the answer will be that you don't seem like you're complying with the responsibility of what we need you to do before you come to in-person, and we'll be looking at a remote plan. So, you know, we're in a place where that's always the option if people aren't able to do what we need them to do for safety practices. You know, that's a little different than the masks. I think the masks are going to be a much smaller window of reminder and execution on the fact that people aren't complying, because that's a much greater safety need at that point. But the screeners, it's new. We're going to give people a little bit of startup time here, but the expectation is going to go out. We're actually planning a dry practice of it next week. We're building videos, training videos right now for staff and parents and high school kids. We're asking the kids to do it at the high school to see how to do it in Aspen. It's literally 2 clicks in the Aspen portal. It's very simple. And then we're going to actually pick a day before we are in person in school and ask everybody to do it. And there'll be no stakes attached because it won't be one of our live school days, and just make sure everybody knows how to do it. We'll practice it on our end with the reports that generate. And I do believe we'll get a really nice process and habit going there. We just need to get everybody up and running.
John, could you speak to bus monitors? Anything different this year?
We don't have bus monitors on the buses.
On any Boston runs?
Boston runs, will have their usual monitors. The elementary has one. There'll be 2 buses for elementary to split the students, and there'll be one on each of those. There's also a monitor on the middle school bus. And there's 2 high school buses, and currently there has not been any monitors on them, and I don't think there's anything planned for that.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the air quality on buses. I know we talked about air quality in the school buildings. Is there anything in place though to check the air quality on the buses, especially for the long rides to Boston, for instance? Even locally, sometimes I don't know what's the longest ride. Sometimes it could be up to an hour. So, what is in place for the air quality inspection?
We currently don't have an inspection per se for the buses. What we do have in place is the windows to be opened, hatches to be opened, so there'll be good airflow, good air circulation. There are some mounted fans on the windshields that those will be facing to help airflow with inside the bus. And we feel that, you know, it's almost going to be, I feel like to be outside with all those windows being open, and they open quite a bit, and especially with those roof hatches. And the students will be sitting, you know, 1 student per bench. They're in, you know, their compartmentalization so that they are within their own, it's almost as if they're in behind a plexiglass shield in a way, with the seats being so high, and they're very protected from each other as much as anywhere.
I think, and we're about to shift to the HVAC and the building-based things. Russ is here, I know, and Jared. We have now purchased CO2 monitors that really could be used anywhere. We're going to use them predominantly in classrooms, especially at the middle schools. But there is no reason you couldn't take that device on a bus and monitor the CO2 level, which is what I've learned in the last month here is a really excellent way to understand if the airflow is adequate. So why don't we shift to that if you're good with that. We can talk anything facilities related. I think probably the topic of most interest is just follow up to the HVAC report and the work that we're doing in the buildings, especially the middle schools. So if Russ and Jared want to take it from there.
Sure. Russ, I'll even let you lead, unless you actually want to have specific questions, and then is there any questions or?
Oh, I can bring you up to date what we've been doing. So good evening, everyone. So basically, we've been focusing a lot of our time over at the Peabody and Sanborn, the oldest buildings. We're just lining up some resources to go in and check the univents. Each classroom has one. There's approximately 50 of these vents per school. But basically, we're going to be going through with HVAC technicians just to prove each one out to ensure that the dampers are operating correctly. We're going to be running these units around the clock just to be bringing in makeup air. At the Peabody building, in addition to the univents, per Kalash's recommendations, we're going to have HEPA filters installed in each room, and they will run while class is in session. At all the schools, we're going to have negative flow HEPA filters in the nurse's office for the isolation rooms, or what they're sometimes referred to as medical waiting room. So these units, what they'll do with the nurse's office, it'll put it under a negative pressure and just blow all the air in the room outside a window. And as Laurie mentioned, we did purchase some portable CO2 monitors that will be just going around and doing some random checks when class is in session.
Russ, some neighboring districts are going to be running their systems many more hours than they did in the past, and they're already trying to calculate additional utility costs. Is this going to be a factor that you and Jared are going to be looking at?
Yes, this isn't really the time for energy conservation, but yeah, Jared and I will need to talk, and because like one engineer did recommend that at the Peabody and Sanborn, we should just run these univents round the clock.
Yeah.
At the other schools, we're not gonna be running them around the clock, but we will be running them for extra period of time.
Okay, so we'll hope for a mild winter, and
Yes.
good luck on coming up with some estimates, because it's only going to be an estimate. This is such
Right.
uncharted territory, we know.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other facilities related pieces? We've obviously got a lot of cleaning protocols in place and are really working with the custodial staff. I think all those routines are coming together.
Just a question about the HVAC. On the news, we hear all about those MERV filters. The high school, the high school HVAC system, is that system able to handle this high quality MERV filters, and is there a schedule that the operations at the high school is going to follow to replace those? And what is that system is going to look like in practice?
Yep. All the filters at the high school were just replaced, and all the units, not in all of them, and some of them we have the MERV 13 filters. In all the schools we have a MERV 8 filter. But it's a give and take. If at the schools, if we decided to put in a MERV 13, now you're going to be reducing your airflow. You know, so I believe though the high school and the Willard School, they both use the MERV 13 filters.
So you simply need to run the system harder to get the turnover when you have the higher filtration in place.
Correct. And you're also taking a chance of, if the system wasn't designed for a MERV 13 filter, you know, you're definitely going to reduce airflow, but you could be burning out motors and belts and.
Well,
go ahead.
Please
Oh,
extend, extend to your building level folks that we have always known that a clean, healthy school was a precondition for learning, but I think we were lulled into complacency and started to take it for granted. We don't anymore, Russ. So thank you.
I just wanted to say that I have also heard that older systems might struggle with the MERV 13 filters, and that, as Russ is concerned, it might result in a burnt out system and not as much fresh air. So kind of have to balance the two.
I think running them, you know, around the clock, we're going to be constantly introducing outside air. That combined at the Peabody School, that combined with having the HEPA filter, which is 99.9%, you know, and removing a virus.
Yep.
Very, very safe. That's our oldest building there, is the Peabody. But
and the just I know I saw this in the Willard handbook draft, and maybe it was the high school. Is it both Willard and the high school where the system is considered so good that it's better not to open windows?
Correct, at the Willard, yes.
Willard and the high school?
No, at the high school, I think it's okay to open the windows.
Okay, got it. So that's just Willard. Got it.
Correct.
And does the number of bodies also gets accounted into the calculations of filtration system? Because we are operating at the lower number of students in each classroom at a given time.
Correct. And Kailash, he ran with the numbers. I believe it's like 20 CFM. That's cubic feet per minute per student. And that does correlate well with the number of students in each classroom.
Thank you so much. It's really reassuring that there is a science behind going to school that is safe for everyone. Thank you. I appreciate all the hard work done.
Yeah.
And thank you to Dr. Hunter.
No, thank you to that. I don't get any credit on that one other than supportive of the process. So, thanks for all of that. Really my second to last topic, we just want to, I think we can mention special ed. We're going to actually have a parent night coming up over the next week or so, our parent event. I don't think we've set the time yet, Ruth, right? So we're going to set that time. One update is that we did send out invitations to the students on our intensive programming so that it's by invitation, the students who will come full time, which means they're coming whenever we're open at a school. So at the elementaries, that would be all morning. And at the middle and high school would be the 4.5 or 4 days. So those have gone out. It is just our most needy kids in those programs, and we will certainly be providing extensive special education services to all students, direct service, in line with the IEP, all of that. So that probably is such an in-depth conversation. We'll have the other night and do it then, but if there's any high-level questions, we could answer them. I think just given the time, it might make sense to invite you to that evening when we're hosting for families, or that daytime program once we set it. All right.
So, and again, do we have a date and time for that, Lori?
We do not. Ruth and I will square that up tomorrow. We've been looking at calendars and just hadn't set it yet, so we will do that.
And I trust that'd be a webinar that would be recorded for people to get to later.
Definitely. And we'll publicize it well, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, my last set of topics, which is fairly broad, but I think it works. Just communication. So I know, and I think as a committee, you can certainly give me feedback. I think you have in your questions about the messaging that we would like to be seeing going out to families. Reminders, which I've done a bit of and can do more. Reminders of the choices that families and students make now, and once school starts, the decisions they make outside of school in terms of safety practices and distancing and large group gatherings, all of that will impact what happens. Susan Rask did a nice job of that last week on the webinars we hosted. We had over 200 people across the 2 events, so she did a great job of that. I know there's a lot of interest in making sure we're really messaging the out-of-state travel advisory as the summer winds down, that anybody who's traveled outside of New England, New York, and New Jersey, at least that's the list as of the moment, must quarantine unless they get a COVID test within 72 hours of return. And then, of course, we want to be sure that the handbooks that you've seen, the contracts that are drafted, we're going to finalize those over the next day or so and get those out to families as a tool for communication, one of many, many tools of communication. We've started a lot of building-based email flow going out. I'm going to keep up with what's turned into a weekly correspondence at this point, and just make sure we communicate all of these many, many pieces to families and try to help everyone understand the new processes and the information they need to return safely. So I'll open that up to any discussion or questions and any other topics we haven't covered.
Dr. Hunter, is there a date for I know there were a lot of conversation with the public health and working groups with the public health department at Concord. Is there a rollout date that the public health department at Concord is going to have a safe return to school campaign that can be seen in a physical form around Concord? Students are and families are visiting restaurants. There are kids are hanging out in the downtown, you see these kind of campaigns all around towns that host college campuses. Is there a day that Concord is going to be rolling this out sometime soon to set a tone for students to, to take those healthy habits very seriously?
I can certainly approach them on that. We haven't talked about a campaign specifically. And certainly they want to be part of the messaging and reminders of the impact that those choices have. I think actually we're probably poised to reach families more efficiently through our, auto lists and things like that. So we will certainly continue to do that and ramp that up as the next 2 weeks start to come upon us.
Dr. Hunter, might you entertain having a higher standard for insisting or requesting that the test occur once they return to Massachusetts and not allow the 72-hour window prior to their return?
I think if we're going to tighten that, we probably need to do it at a school committee level, sort of similar to the face mask discussion. I think we would need to have a dialogue here and say that that's going to be our expectation. I'll be honest to say the part I'm struggling with the out-of-state travel is the requirement, it's a self-disclosure piece. And that's where I'm getting stuck. I think most people will comply and they're doing the form, and the Concord health officials get the list of forms that come in, and certainly all of those pieces we could follow up on. I don't know what to do about people who don't participate in the order the way they're supposed to, even though there's a fine attached and all of that. So I'm open to conversation. I understand why you ask, for sure.
I'll share with you anecdotally my personal experience, and that was I left the state. I came back, I quarantined for 36 hours, then I went for my COVID test, got my results within 24 hours, went to report at the state level and was unable to, because the state website would only accept a date beginning tomorrow. It would show a calendar, and the calendar would be open for a day hence. And so the system appears to be kind of compromised in that way.
Court, I don't think Court, I don't actually think they're ever asking you to upload the PCR result. They're asking you to get it. I don't think that the state is actually tracking that.
No, they didn't ask me for the results. They asked me, when am I returning to Massachusetts? And I could only answer in the future. I'm just telling you, it's a calendar. You can't manually enter it. You have to pick a date off a calendar that only shows tomorrow forward. So just, it's one more way that we're doing our best to get data, but we might not be getting all the data. Speaking more specifically back to the contract, my personal take on what I've seen is that we call it contract, but it reads as expectations.
Yeah, actually, Mike Mastrul and I were playing with it last night and reworded the student piece to say, I promise to, and tweaked it for those reasons. And it's still a work in progress. So I think you're right, Court. The way it reads right now is expectations. And if we want to call it contract, or I think Cynthia mentioned compact, I think we could present it a little differently. Yeah.
Before we
go
ahead on contract, before I go to something else, Cynthia, sorry.
So I was just hoping that, just a little language in there, I think is very powerful, talking about, these are all of us doing, not just the students, the staff, the faculty, everybody, parents, making a commitment to do their very best to follow these rules so that we can stay in school.
Yeah.
And stay healthy. So
I'm going to make some more tweaks, and then I'll share you another version.
Yeah, because right now what we're doing is tacitly endorsing the drafts that we saw over the weekend. as to the building level plan. So I'd like to just note a couple of things. One, we know that there are going to be changes, improvements, updates, corrections. We know that there's a lot of uniformity across the buildings. So might I ask that you consider numbering the items so that a change in one of these documents can be translated into other documents. Face coverings is face coverings district-wide. A section on food service might be similar, and a change in one building might necessitate a change in another. So some kind of coding to accompany the hyperlinks, I think it'll make it a lot easier for families and for students. And the extent to which we can remove some of the shoulds and wills and encourage and waiting for with anything more declarative, I think will be helpful.
Thanks, Court.
In terms of the contract, I've heard some schools call it a pledge, and really making sure that the students and the families adhere to it, and having the same expectations for families inside the communities, collaborating with local businesses to adhere to the public health directives at the moment.
Thanks.
Do we need to do more, this school committee or the leadership, with communications with Boston families? We are trying to encourage, what do we call it? Voices at every level and every stage. We know we're well equipped with a talented Metco director. However, I wouldn't want to see Boston families underrepresented in our planning. And we've got a little more planning time before we close that window. Is there more to be done, or are we reasonably satisfied?
There's been a lot of communication with them. I don't know if there's ever a point where you say it's completely enough, but there's been a lot of ongoing all summer actually, and right on through up until now. So there's been regular meetings, regular correspondence. The principals have all worked with Andrew and through Andrew, and will continue to do so. So I think putting it top of our list of things to think about, Court, is wise, so we can ensure that it stays that way.
All right, but you've reassured me because I'm not party to those conversations,
Yeah,
and
sure.
I trust they're happening, but I appreciate hearing it. Thank you. The draft documents certainly look good, and I hope that we have made clear some of the fine tuning that might be useful. I think that was one of our intentions tonight, if I'm correct.
I think so. I think hopefully this answered a lot of your questions and has given the public a way to hear more of the details of the planning. And that's certainly been the goal, is to be as open and accessible as possible. So I hope the last 2.5 hours help to further that process.
I'd say very, and if I can jump in quickly before we wrap up, I have 2 quick comments and then one more broad one. The quick one's only that earlier on, Laura, you brought up the concept of the substitute nurse and said something along the lines of, if you all approve, and I'm not sure if you needed our tacit approval or not, but I'd just like to voice that I think what you're doing certainly makes sense. It's fabulous planning, and I at least am very much in support of that, even the per diem rate that we would have to pay for it. The second, you were just talking about communication, and I just want to pass on that I have heard from multiple people recently, parents in the community, reaching out just to say, wow, the communication on this has been incredible.
Good.
And that there's been information, it's been clear. People have actually reached out to me to say, you know, this is a tough decision, but I really feel that I was heard. And I feel that the community has been listened to in this. And so I just wanted to pass that on. As we all know, it's not an easy answer. And we all knew going into it that no matter what we do, we're not going to make everybody happy. But I think one of the most important things is knowing that people do feel heard, and they do. I've heard that feedback. So just wanted to share that. And the third thing is higher level. And it's really to all of the administrators here who've spent not only 2.5 hours with us tonight, but I know incredible hours over this summer. And I just want to say, I'm sitting here listening tonight. I'm blown away. I mean, I'm almost speechless. This plan is comprehensive and it's pretty amazing. I've had a list of questions in my parking lot for weeks. And many of them were answered in the drafts that we saw over the weekend, and the rest of them were answered tonight. I haven't even had to jump in with many questions because as I went down my list, I kept checking them off here. And I would say to every question that was asked, there seems to be a well thought out answer to. We haven't found anything that hasn't been accounted for. And you know, it just seems like an incredible jigsaw puzzle. You know, everybody jokes about how jigsaw puzzles got popular during COVID, but this one's more complicated than most. And even a little example at the high school of how open campus affects lunch, which affects supervision, which affects other things. You know, there are so many factors that tie in. And I just want to say, from my perspective at least, and I'm sure from everybody's, the appreciation on our behalf of all of the time that this team has put in is just so deep. I can't believe all that you guys have accomplished in the past couple months. And we're about to launch not just remote schooling, but a plan for education that's in-person, hybrid, and remote all at the same time and can swap between them. And 2 months ago, that seemed like an impossible task, and you've accomplished it and we're ready to launch. So I just want to tell you that I feel even short of words to say it, but so grateful for all that's been done this summer. It's amazing.
Thank you, Heather. Very kind.
Yeah, certainly can't thank you enough for all the work you've done and are going to do over the next months. This is incredible and above and beyond, and we're lucky to have each and every one of you, as I knew we would be.
So I just want to give a particular shout out to the Concord Middle School. I think their opening website and all the detailed work they've already done on their Twitter feed, and it's just, I think it's inspiring confidence. Is the high school going to do a similar Google site?
Yeah, we actually started building it now. I mean, the important thing is to house it in one place more than anything.
Yep.
So it's possible it'll be a Google site that has started, or it would just be in another location. But yeah, stay tuned.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from committee members? Comments, questions? Before we let this
Just
go,
our continuing gratitude for the attentiveness. You know, people have been bearing down on this for a long time, and we're going to continue to bear down on it. And notably, our school leadership and our teachers and support staff are going to be out in front very visibly in a matter of days now. So thank you for your readiness.
Cord, if I could just make one comment. So thank you for everyone saying such lovely things about the administrative team. But all the work that we've accomplished this summer was a byproduct of all the work that was done by our committees. We had the good fortune of being chairing those committees, but broad representation and commitment and hard work. Each building represented, had representation of at least 20 to 25 people. So thank you for your kind words, but the real heavy lifting occurred behind the scenes. It's just our name on the document in the end. So please, I want you to know that we wouldn't be where we are without the work of so many other people.
Point well taken. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, thank you.
Pass along our thanks to those people.
Yeah, and I guess my last comment is certainly a big thank you to this group because they've worked tirelessly for months now. But our teachers and families have been so engaged all summer. I mean, we can set a webinar, a staff. We've been having weekly staff meetings at every school for the last 6 weeks here, and we draw teachers without teachers, support staff. Everyone's there without. It's optional. It's summer. They don't have to be present. And every webinar we have, we can easily draw 100 people. So I think the community and the faculty's engagement has just kept it as a cycle of feedback all throughout. So it's nothing got built in isolation. And I think that has mattered greatly. Even when there's been really hard choices, I'm not going to tell you every conversation's been easy. It has not. I assure you it has not. And yet we're getting to a plan that we're all going to work forward. And, the ultimate goal, going remote's so much simpler. If you don't think I haven't thought that, I certainly have. Going remote is simpler, but it's not best for kids. And the health data warrants the work to bring them back. So I'm just so grateful everyone put in the time and energy. And there's, the next phase is in front of us now, which is actually a little bit of an energy boost. And boy, once we see some young people back in our schools, that's going to be motivating. So thanks everyone.
Just also wanted to express my gratitude for all the work of all the committee and the comprehensive and thorough planning process that everyone participated and gave up their summers, the whole summer for. It's countless hours, I know, on Zoom, not very much fun. But really, as a parent and a school committee member, I really appreciate all of the hard work done by everyone.
Right. On that note, should we let most of this team go and have some dinner and get to see their families again?
Yes, we should.
Not that everyone isn't welcome to stay for the duration, but we just have a couple of votes to take. If committee members don't have any more comments or questions, I think we should thank this amazing group and let them head off on their way.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Good luck with the start.
Okay. Wow, that was quite a discussion. And Lori, thanks for structuring it and just laying out all those topics that people had questions on. That was quite comprehensive. So we just have a couple of action items. Well,
Yeah. So could you just tell us a little bit about this motion on the chairs?
Yes, I can.
Making space.
I don't know if you've seen the chairs purchased when the new school opened, the orange upholstered chairs that were down in the lobby. They get heavy usage, and they just haven't, they're 5 years in, and they literally have just worn out. The arms have worn through, occasional rips, which I can't say is just wear and tear, normal or not, but they're not in good shape. So we're going to be looking to replace them. We actually started to look at that at the June closeout of the regional budget, a little money to start tackling those replacements, but they're not a proud entry landmark that I think we want to have kids using and leave there. So part of what's in storage will be the ones we started to purchase to replace those, hopefully of better quality. I actually, you make FF&E choices when you build a new school, and you can't always tell how they're going to sustain, especially upholstered stuff, how it'll sustain all day usage like that. And I think the life maybe wasn't as long as we had hoped. So Jared, do you have anything to add to that about the chairs?
I don't. There's about 62 of them, and they are surplus. We did order ones with last year's money, but we were able to, I believe we didn't get those in. So they're still on hold. We did pay for them, and they'll be delivered when we're ready to take them.
Are these representing chairs in all the lobbies at the high school?
These are the sofa chairs. I want to say they're red. I think they're red.
They're orange.
Okay.
Yeah.
Light brown in many cases.
I stay away from colors, but yes, they're orange.
That's right.
It's mostly the ones on the first floor where the kids are congregating before school, after school, during the day, all day. The ones up in the breakout rooms are in better shape, so we're not disposing of all of those.
All right, I don't want to fuss with tiny details here, but I can't imagine 62 pieces of upholstered furniture in that lobby. There's high back chairs, there's various things, but the upholstered stuff, do they really number 62?
They're spread throughout, but there's 62 of them.
Interesting. Okay.
Can I have a motion that the Concord Carlisle School Committee votes to approve the removal of 62 lobby chairs from CCHS?
So moved.
Second for both for the high school.
Thank you. Any discussion? Thank you, chairs. You served us well.
They did. Very loved, I would say.
Yeah. I'm oftentimes envious as I walk through there and see people sprawled all over in the afternoon. So a roll vote. Mustafi?
Mustafi, aye for region.
Wilson?
Aye for region.
Bout?
Aye.
Booth?
Aye.
Rainey?
Aye.
Johnston, aye. And do you want to do the school committee policy one, Heather?
Sure, I think that's for both of us. Do we have well, let's see, I don't see a link to the most recent, but you guys looked at it last time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a motion for both committees to approve policy EBCFA, face coverings?
I want to, before that motion happens, just note that, Lori, I think you and I are going to go live with some conversation about this. Tell me, chairs, if this is out of order. If you move this, we're going to ask for an amendment, I think. So maybe we just take it from the top with.
Do you want to just
make the amendment?
Show us a new one, amend it, and then we can make a motion on that.
So you're going to hear Lori and I unscripted here. If we look at last week's EBCFA, Lori, I would propose, no motion yet, I would propose that a third paragraph be inserted there that is word for word out of the high school handbook, the importance of community cooperation, et cetera, down through the 5 bullets of recommended face coverings. I wonder if that's sort of in sync with where you're going.
Right. We had talked, if you'll remember last week, we had been referencing the concerns over gators and the reliability of those being protective. And I've had quite a bit of feedback, including from individual committee members of the science coming out of the Duke study hasn't, this is where we are in this virus, right? That nothing's repeatedly tested. So it's always one study that gets released. So what Court wisely is suggesting, and I think it's a great suggestion, the high school handbook, rather than saying what is excluded, it highlights on what we'd be looking for. So all face coverings, whether disposable or reusable, must be made with at least 2 layers of breathable material, fully cover the nose and mouth and secure under the chin, fit snugly but comfortably against the side of the face, be secured with ties or ear loops, and allow hands-free. And at this time, this is how the high school worded it, based on guidance from health authorities, neck gaiters, open chin triangle bandanas, and face coverings containing valves, mesh material, or holes of any kind are not acceptable. And I think that to me, that's worded, I think I like Court's suggestion because it's worded in a way that says, based on the moment in time, there's just enough doubt we're gonna not allow that, but it does fully describe what we are looking for. So I'm very comfortable with that. This may be a policy we bring back is better and consistent information is present. But this would put us in a place where I think, we're erring on the side of caution. And I think that's not a bad approach at all.
So you read the section out of the high school handbook, which they've sourced elsewhere. Their reference to guest was an error. They mean to allow the student to remain hands-free, but other than that, you read it verbatim. Would you agree with me that a paragraph 3 be inserted? Would that be the appropriate placement?
I believe so. Yes. I can put up last week's if that's helpful as reference.
And other members of the policy subcommittee are on board with this, I assume.
We have not met since last week, so we do not have anything as a subcommittee to bring you beyond what Lori's going to screen share.
It was more of a
and the fact that we didn't move on it because we knew we wanted to examine it further.
That was more of a question to speak up or further your piece.
I'm sorry.
And I think you mentioned, things will change about masks, and rather than put something in here to that effect, we'll just monitor this and remember that we have this policy, and if there's some info out of the CDC or somewhere else that's authoritative that says we should be doing, nothing other than N100s, then we'll take that up as a shift to the policy.
So in Carlisle, on the policy subcommittee, we were also talking about the face masks and what would be permissible and all that. And we had started to talk about the same kind of language about the at least a double layer and that. And Lori Bruce, our director of student services, took out some masks that they had been experimenting with that are plastic here, but then with fabric foam around the edges that are particularly useful in certain educational environments. And I don't know if the language as you have it would preclude the use of that kind of mask. And I just want to be aware of, I don't know if also if your staff is looking at those.
Yeah, no, we are. In fact, so it's a great point, because we are definitely looking at them, and we've purchased those for the teachers if they want to use them for those kinds of, for any reason, even if it's just to have a smile be seen. So I guess that's a very good point, that we don't want to be so restrictive that we eliminate the positive choices that we might be looking for too. So
Laura, the only thing I'll say is this says if you were to show up with a gator, the high school handbook, it sounds like to me we would offer them a mask, a disposable mask.
I think
policy kind of says you'll be sent home.
I think the different, and maybe it's nuance that we need to clear up in the language. The gator, sorry, the gator's not acceptable, here's a disposable mask, implies the cooperation of wearing the mask.
Understood.
The policy, I think, is about refusal. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, okay. I think it's good,
So to Sarah's point, do we throw a qualifier into your first bullet, Lori, that now reads, be made with at least 2 layers of breathable material, or receive approval from the nurse or something like that?
Or how about impermeable material, which is what the plastic is.
Well, we're back to the 2 layers issue. It's all in the darn wording when you get to policy. And you haven't solved it in Carlisle yet. It's still in debate.
We're working on the wording.
Yeah.
And we're also debating the neck gaiter thing based on different information that we're receiving.
Well, so Lori, for these few in number that are questionable, some commercial one that we haven't seen before, you are going to have somebody in the building who's going to have to pass muster on it. I mean, as a matter of practicality anyway, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Hey guys, I have a question. Has anyone, whether it's in conjunction with Susan Rask or I don't know, whoever, found a mask we do like, and like, would you ever just consider adding it to like a school supply list and just say, buy these masks?
So I know the middle school PTG is buying masks, and it sounded like the high school PA was going that way today, at least for the senior class. So there's some of that evolving.
And are these probably 3-ply surgicals?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yep, we need to check.
There is a comfort level that comes with each individual and the sizing that is hard to just blanketly buy masks. Are we going to require that the students have a spare mask in the backpack, or would that be just a recommendation?
I think that sounds like a recommendation. I think it would be hard to enforce. We'll always have disposable available, so that is a backup if they don't have something.
This is not an impressive way to do business on this, for which I'll take responsibility as chair of the policy subgroup, but I'd like to get something in place so that it could go in the handbook by way of a link. And if we change it, we change it. What would satisfy me would be bullet number 1 be made with at least 2 layers of breathable material, comma, or receive pre-approval from the school nurse.
That sounds fine.
Okay.
Would you like to hear the additions again? That would be a new paragraph 3, folks.
Yeah, why don't you just make a motion, Court, and include that?
So I move that the policy EBCFA recommendation that was presented last week and not acted on be approved with the following changes. 1, that the source MASC be removed because there are multiple sources. And number 2, that a new paragraph 3 read as follows: all face coverings, parentheses, whether disposable or reusable, close parentheses, must, full colon, bullet, be made with at least 2 layers of breathable material, comma, or receive pre-approval from the school nurse. Bullet, fully cover the nose and mouth and secure under the chin. 3rd bullet, fit snugly but comfortably against the side of the face. Bullet 4, be secured with ties or ear loops and allow the student to remain hands-free. Bullet 5 and final for this paragraph 3, at this time, comma, based on guidance from health authorities, comma, neck gaiters, comma, open chin triangle bandanas, and face coverings containing valves, comma, mesh material or holes of any kind are not acceptable face coverings, period.
Question for Court.
That was a motion. Let's get a second on it.
That for both.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Just a quick discussion point. There are some masks that have bungees. Would that be still qualify under the ties? Thanks.
As long as it ties or ear loops, and if it's something even more unusual, the school nurse has the authority to say that's okay.
Or is it?
Satisfied, thank you.
Lori, are you content for the time being? You're mute.
Sorry, my house is busy tonight. I keep muting. So I think the combination, we've tightened up. I think we've done a really good job of tightening up the general exceptions to the masks, that there really aren't any. I think it's very clear in there, the expectation, and there's an outcome to that if people don't comply. And now we've set some real guidelines as to what we're expecting in terms of what kids are wearing. So I think we're in good shape to start, and we'll come back if we need to.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Let's do a roll. Rainey,
Aye for both.
Booth,
Aye for both.
Pout,
Aye for both.
Mustafi,
Mustafi for region.
Wilson,
Aye for region.
Johnston, aye for both. And we should set some meeting times. And I know that the team, the administration team and the teachers are going to be really busy next week. I don't know that, we might want to give them a week off from this. And, but I throw that out there. And, I suppose the following week is just as busy. So maybe if we did one meeting between now and, the end of next week.
I think that'd be sensible. I wonder, however, if the chairs and the superintendent would want to keep the meeting for September 1 on the books until Friday, just in case. I don't know, Lori.
Yeah, we could do that in case something comes up, and then maybe schedule either, we've got to, could we do something Thursday the 3rd, and then unless there's something extraordinary, we don't have a meeting the week of the 7th.
I would prefer to meet on the 7th in anticipation of town meeting. Just so we're queued up for that.
You mean the week of
Or
the
8th.
That's the first day of school.
The 7th is Labor Day.
Yeah. 8th is the first day of school, right?
Right.
Virtual, but it's a big day.
Court, if you think about what we're proposing at town meeting, we don't have anything contentious because we're lined up with FinCom, and we've shown our capital articles and had really no negative feedback on that.
True.
I don't know that we.
Okay, and we've always got an hour before town meeting, too.
Right, exactly. I think there might be an article, I was thinking about this when he was presenting to FinCom, or presenting at the public hearing. The article about the
buses?
Yeah, the inverters. Is that something we might want to review and decide to weigh in on?
So Wally's referring to a citizen petition for $50,000 infrastructure improvements to the bus depot so that one electric bus wouldn't be fed with a single feed, but rather that feed would accommodate multiple buses in the future. Did that capture it?
I think so. I think it also gives us the ability to do the inverters to turn the flow back from the battery to the grid.
Send it back to the grid and reduce the summer peaks and so on. So to your question, Wally, my answer is yes, I think it'd be appropriate for the school committee to take a position.
So whatever we do for the next meeting, I'll reach out to Brian Folds and see if he can join us for a brief, little tiny presentation on that compared to the one he gave at town meeting.
Yeah, with his slideshow coming our way first. His slideshow was quite good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a great presentation. I don't know that we need quite as much detail to make our decision. So I will do that. So are we back to leaning toward the end of the week of the 31st? the first on, just in case something happens between now and Friday. And then if it doesn't, we have a meeting on Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, if we're planning on the 3rd, I don't know that we need a tentative on the 1st. I mean, it's only 2 days.
Yeah.
Different. We're planning for the 3rd. Why don't we just plan for the 3rd?
Yes, please. Yes.
Fine, okay.
Does that work? So then we're looking at the 3rd and then skipping the following week and meeting the 15th.
After town meeting, so we'd have our first new meeting.
Right, so the next, exactly, the first meeting after town meeting is the 15th, and that's when we seat our new full committee.
Correct.
Will we strike the one that's posted now for the 8th, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
If we're having one the 3rd. I mean, I think it's either the 3rd or the 8th. In terms of which is better, I don't know. Lori, do you have an opinion in terms of when you think you might either need feedback from us on something or have updates for us?
I feel like the 3rd's a little easier to manage because the 8th is, I mean, we've got teachers back next week and that's
right.
one thing, but the kids are back the 8th and then we're ramping up to get them in the buildings on the 9th and 10th. So
yeah.
I'm personally going to go on the 8th, having it be my first day of school. I don't
yeah, no, I think that's when the pace really picks up. So the 3rd makes sense because that'll be the lead up to that. And then the 15th, not only will town meeting have happened, but we'll have had, 3 and 4 days in the buildings. And I think that's very well timed. So.
Okay, good. So the 3rd and the 15th are our next 2 meetings.
Question about the 15th. Are we going to revert to evening? I am of 2 minds about it. So I'll just put the question out.
Being that we're virtual, I tend to feel that 5 o'clock counts as evening. And I know we had one email with a question about it, but other than that, I haven't heard any negative feedback.
And to your point, Heather, participation has been exceedingly high compared to.
It's very high. We have not heard.
Yeah.
I won't say we won't have heard complaints. We had one comment that it was inconvenient, but other than that, we've had hundreds of people showing up at 5. In fact, maybe more so than at 6:30, which tends to be more of a dinner time. So if we were at Ripley, I wouldn't say 5 o'clock, but given that it's virtual and online, I think 5 o'clock is a pretty good time for a lot of people.
Does it work for our members?
The first question. Works for me.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
So
Did
the
we
3rd
put
will
a
be at
time on
5,
the 3rd? Oh, sorry, what?
5 o'clock on the 3rd.
Yes, so let's stick with 5 o'clock.
Okay, good.
Okay, I would take a meeting to adjourn. Oh, no, we have to do the executive session.
Yes.
So complicated. Let me,
You want me to read it?
I got it. Take a motion that the Concord School Committee and Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee will enter into the executive session under Purpose 3 of the Open Meeting Law to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and not return to open session.
So moved for both. Second for both.
Okay, Aaron, pay attention. They switched that. So roll. Rainey.
Aye for both.
Booth.
Aye for both.
Out.
Aye for both.
Wilson.
Aye for region.
Mustafi.
Mustafi for region.
Johnston, aye for both. See you on the other side.
You.